Good evening, everyone. Tonight we embark on a quiet journey into a world wrapped in mist and memory. A place where smoke curls softly from thatched rooftops and the sound of distant roosters echoes through the dawn. You're about to open your eyes in a place called Ashgrove, a small medieval village that rises with the sun and breathes with the seasons. But be warned, once you step into this world, you may not want to come back. There's something hauntingly beautiful about its rhythm, its hardships, and the quiet strength of those who lived it. So, before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm creating here. And tell me in the comments below, where are you watching from and what time is it there as you listen to this story? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a small fan for a soft background hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. At the very first light of dawn, the village of Ashgrove begins to stir. The sky is just beginning to blush with streaks of pale gold and dusty pink, and the chill of the night still lingers in the air. From inside the thatched cottages, faint plumes of smoke drift upward as hearth fires are rekindled. There's a smell of damp wood and ash, mingling with the earthy aroma of livestock and churned soil. In one corner of the village, a rooster crows, sharp and persistent as if demanding the day to begin. And in a straw-covered hut near the edge of the field, Tomric, a 38-year-old plowman, sits up slowly from his bedding. His back is stiff. The straw beneath him is damp with the night's cold, and the clay floor has grown hard as stone. There is no mattress, only woven rushes and folded cloth to serve as a blanket. His wife has already begun tending the fire. The children still sleep, curled beside each other near the animals for warmth. The hut is small, one room that serves as bedroom, kitchen, and living space for all 5 members of the family. A low wooden table stands at the center, flanked by rough-hewn benches. There's a single window, no glass, just a shutter that creaks when it swings. Everything here bears the mark of use and survival. There is no luxury, no ornament, only necessity. Tomric pulls on his tunic, made from coarse wool, patched at the elbows. His boots are cracked but still hold together. There's a sense of routine in every movement, motions repeated so many times they've become muscle memory. His wife hands him a small portion of barley bread, hardened from yesterday, and a cup of thin ale. It's not for pleasure. The water in town is foul. Ale is safer, even for children. The morning meal is brief and silent. Outside, the village comes alive with low murmurs, doors opening, animals being let out. Smoke thickens above rooftops, and the clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoes from the far side of the green. It's the sound that marks the beginning of labor. For in Ashgrove, every day is the same. Work until sunset, sleep, then begin again. Tomric steps out into the field, his breath rising in small clouds. He makes his way to the stable where 2 oxen wait, slow-eyed, massive creatures already yoked to the plow. The plow itself is wooden, simple in design with a worn iron blade. It's heavy but reliable. His father used the same tool, and one day, if fortune allows, perhaps his son will too. He leads the oxen to the edge of the field, where the earth lies cold and untouched. The soil here is thick and clay-rich, difficult to break, especially after a dry winter. Tomric tightens the harness and places his hands firmly on the plow handles. With a low grunt and a sharp word, he urges the oxen forward. The blade bites into the soil. The first furrow opens, long and straight, dark earth turned toward the sky. Each pass is slow. The oxen pull with effort, hooves pressing deep into the furrows. Tomric walks behind, shoulders bent, hands calloused from years of work. At the end of each row, he pauses to catch his breath, then heaves the plow around for another pass. His boots sink into the damp earth and flies gather around his sweat-drenched tunic. This is not glorious work. It's not poetic, but it is essential. Every turn of the soil means food on the table months from now. Every seed that will be sown relies on this back-breaking labor. In the distance, he can hear other villagers beginning their own work. someone chopping wood, the bleat of a goat, the creak of a cartwheel. But out here, in the vast field, Tomric is alone with the wind and the birds and the steady breath of the oxen. There is a kind of peace in the repetition, a rhythm older than memory. He pauses at midday to eat, a small chunk of cheese, a bit of onion, more barley bread. He leans against a tree stump, eyes closed, feeling the sun rise higher. There's no time to rest long. The day is short, the land waits. By afternoon, the furrows stretch behind him like long scars across the field. The soil, once hard, is now tilled and open. In a few days, the sower will walk these rows with a sack of seed across his chest. Then, if the weather holds, green shoots will rise, and with luck, there will be a harvest. But all of that starts here, with the plow, with the sweat, with Tomric and his team, and this day that looks exactly like the one before it, and the one that will follow. As the sun begins to dip toward the western hills, he finishes the last furrow. His hands ache, his knees tremble slightly. He unyokes the oxen and pats their thick necks. They breathe slowly, steam rising from their bodies. He walks back to the village under a sky streaked with amber. Behind him, the field lies quiet and ready, and though no one will write songs about Tomric, his work will feed them all. Tomorrow he will rise again with the rooster. Tomorrow the land will call. As the first stars blink into view above the village of Ashgrove, the gentle hum of nighttime activity settles over the thatched rooftops. A few dogs bark distantly. Somewhere, a lute strums softly from a cottage window. But in most homes, supper has been eaten, the hearth is dying down, and sleep waits just beyond the door. Yet, not everyone is preparing for bed. At the edge of the village green, a figure moves with quiet urgency. Edwin, 27 years old, son of a plowman, and now a sower in his own right. His steps are steady as he makes his way to the barn. Tomorrow will be his first day of spring sowing, and he wants to check the seed himself. Inside the dim structure, the air smells of straw, old wood, and grain. Hanging from a thick beam is the seed sack, a large, rough-woven pouch with a leather strap worn smooth by years of labor. Edwin runs his hand through the contents, pale kernels of barley and rye, cleaned and dried, their fate hanging on the precision of his hands. He knows the responsibility that rests on him. If he scatters too many seeds in one spot, the plants will choke each other out. Too few, and weeds will creep in and ruin the yield. The ground must be seeded evenly, rhythmically, not rushed, not sloppy. It is a task both art and habit, taught not just by elders but by the land itself. Before dawn breaks the next morning, Edwin is already dressed, sack slung across his shoulder. The field, freshly plowed by Tomric just the day before, lies dark and ridged, a sleeping canvas awaiting its first brushstroke. The wind is light, the sky gray with promise. Clouds drift low, but the air carries no threat of rain, not yet. He steps into the field and begins. With each stride, he dips his hand into the sack, draws out a handful of grain, and casts it in a wide, fluid arc. The motion is simple, but practiced. His arm moves like a pendulum, grain fanning out to land softly along the furrows. Left hand balances the sack, right hand sows. Step, scoop, scatter. Step, scoop, scatter. The sound of grain meeting soil is almost musical, a soft patter like tiny pebbles falling onto cloth. There is no applause, no audience, but Edwin moves as though performing something sacred. All around him, life stirs. A flock of birds circles overhead, already watching for an opening. He knows their game. The moment he turns his back, they'll descend to peck away at the newly scattered seed. He's brought a bundle of sticks and colored cloths tied to string, which he sets up at intervals. Scarecrows of the simplest kind. They won't work for long, but it's better than nothing. A little farther off, a small child, Leofric, just 8 years old, is running along the furrows, shouting and waving his arms to chase away the more daring birds. It's his first spring helping in the fields. His face is flushed with excitement and exertion, and Edwin smiles to himself. There was a time, not so long ago, when he too was that boy, breathless and eager to be useful. By midday, the wind shifts, the clouds deepen. Edwin wipes the sweat from his brow and surveys the progress. The lower field is done, a solid morning's work. He takes a brief rest beneath an old elm at the field's edge. From his pouch, he pulls out a small lunch, cheese, bread, and a few wild onions. Nearby, Leofric picks at a patch of moss with a stick, humming tunelessly. They don't speak much. There's no need. The silence between them is full of earth, of effort, of the quiet companionship shared by those who labor together. Then it's back to work. The upper field is longer, sloped at one end. It takes more care. The grain scatters differently when thrown uphill, and Edwin adjusts his stance. He shortens his stride, tightens his swing. The wind grows stronger now, pushing from the east. He compensates, angling each throw slightly to the right. Every handful matters. From a distance, the sight is almost hypnotic. A lone man walking the earth, scattering life from his hands. There is a rhythm to it, like a prayer said with the body instead of the lips. Near the end of the field, Edwin stops to rest again. His arms ache, his back protests, but he is not finished. The sky is dimming now, not from sunset light, but from the slow arrival of low gray clouds. He knows rain is near. He tightens the sack and picks up his pace. The final stretch is a race. The wind is gusting harder. The first droplets touch his face. Birds wheel and cry above him. His legs churn through the furrows, seed flying in controlled bursts, lips pressed tight in focus. It is not panic. It is determination. He will finish. By the time he throws the last handful, the rain is falling in earnest. He pulls the empty sack close to his chest and stands still for a moment, letting the cool drops soak through his tunic. The job is done. Behind him, the field lies sown, quiet, brown, and waiting. In a few days, if the weather is kind, tiny green shoots will rise through the dirt. They will feed the village. And no one will remember the man who threw each seed, who raced the clouds, who trusted the wind and bent his back in silence. But Edwin will know, and the earth will remember. As he and Leofric walk back toward the village, muddy and soaked, the rain begins to ease. Smoke curls once again from the chimneys. The hens cluck. The day ends, as all days in Ashgrove do, not with triumph, but with quiet continuation. Tomorrow, another task will begin. But tonight, the seed rests in the soil, and Edwin rests with the knowledge that his part, at least for now, is done. In the village of Ashgrove, the days pass like beads on a string, each one a mirror of the last, each one shaped by sun, soil, and toil. After the seed is cast and the rain has settled into the earth, the people of the village turn their eyes toward the next phase: protection, patience, and care. Summer arrives quietly. It doesn't announce itself with great fanfare, but rather with longer light and the scent of growing things. Isolde, 34 years old, wakes before the dawn, as she always does. She isn't a plowwoman or a sower, but her hands are never idle. In her cottage, beside the faint warmth of last night's hearth, she kneads dough for the day's bread, while her two daughters sweep the floor and fetch water from the well. Outside, the village is already humming. The crops planted by Tomric and sown by Edwin are beginning to rise, slender green stalks trembling in the morning breeze. But this is not the time to celebrate. In fact, this is the most precarious stretch of all. The growing season is fraught with danger. Insects creep through the stalks, hungry and invisible until it's too late. Weeds push up with a greed that rivals the barley. Wild animals, too, test the edges of the fields. Hares, badgers, even deer slip through hedges in the dark of night, leaving ruin in their wake. And then there are the thieves, desperate souls from other villages, drawn by hunger to another man's labor. Isolde's husband Bryce spends his days watching the edges of their land. He's not a soldier, just a farmer with a walking stick and a good eye. Each morning he circles the fields, checking for prints in the mud, snapped twigs, signs of trampling. Sometimes he shouts at shadows, sometimes he finds nothing, but he walks all the same because vigilance is the only shield they have. While Bryce patrols, Isolde works tirelessly at home. The bread rises slowly. Butter must be churned. Cheese must be salted and stored in the cool corner by the door. There is wool to card, cloth to mend, water to boil for washing, and herbs to tend in the garden behind the house. The beans are flowering, the cabbage is firm. The leeks are thin but promising. Even her youngest, Mara, only 6, has her duties. She sings to the chickens as she gathers their eggs. Her song is not magical, but the hens seem to lay more when she hums. Isolde says nothing of it, but she smiles each time she hears the girl's quiet voice drifting through the open door. The days are long now, the sun hangs high, and the labor doesn't wait. By midday, Isolde's back aches from stirring the laundry cauldron. The smell of lye and ash soap clings to her skin, and her fingers are puckered and raw. There's no time for rest. The family's clothing must be scrubbed and wrung out by hand, then laid across the hedges and fence posts to dry. Later, she joins the other women in the gardens near the church wall. Together, they weed and water and whisper about the weather. Rain is due, someone says. Thunderclouds were seen beyond the ridge. Another woman warns of aphids on the beets. They nod in agreement but keep their hands moving. The soil is dry today, but it might not be tomorrow. Back at home, the meal must be prepared. There's a pot of barley and peas simmering on the hearth. A bit of pork rind, saved from the spring slaughter, adds flavor, though there's no meat left on it. The children are fed first. Bryce arrives just after sunset, carrying a bundle of nettles and a few mushrooms. They'll be dried for winter. As the sky darkens, the family gathers on low stools around the fire. The baby sleeps. Mara listens with wide eyes as Isolde tells the tale of the green fox who outsmarted a nobleman and stole his boots. It's a silly story, but laughter is rare and precious here, and she spins it slowly, savoring the smiles. Later, when the house grows quiet, Isolde sews by firelight, mending a tunic, patching a hole in Bryce's breeches. Her fingers move quickly, precisely. Each stitch is a silent offering, a prayer that the cloth will hold another season. Outside, the wheat whispers in the warm breeze. Tomorrow, they'll have to chase the crows again. Edwin will be out early with his ribbons and stakes. Tomric may lend his dog. Leofric will wave a stick and shout with all the seriousness of a boy on a grand mission. Isolde knows it well. She's watched many summers come and go, and with each one the same lesson returns. Survival is not dramatic. It is not forged in a single heroic act. It is woven stitch by stitch, meal by meal, morning by morning. The moon rises above Ashgrove, casting a soft silver light across the rooftops. The fire burns low, and the sounds of the village settle into stillness. But even in the quiet, the work never truly ends. In Isolde's dreams, the garden grows endlessly and the bread always rises. And in the stillness of that dream, she finds rest, not because the work is finished, but because she knows she will wake and do it all again. With care, with patience, with love. And that is enough. Dawn arrives not with a shout, but with a whisper. A soft light slips through the wooden slats of the barn and creeps across the fields of Ashgrove. The village is still, suspended in that quiet breath between night and day. Somewhere, a rooster clears its throat. A cow shifts its weight. Then comes the first true sound of the morning, the low, steady bleating of sheep echoing across the valley. High on the misty hillside, Gareth, a 43-year-old shepherd, stirs beneath a rough woolen cloak. He sleeps beside his flock, the rhythm of their breath his lullaby and his alarm. His shelter is nothing more than a crude lean-to of timber and turf, just enough to break the wind and shield the fire. But it's enough for Gareth, who has never cared much for walls. He rises slowly, brushing off the dew that clings to his sleeves. Around him, the sheep begin to move, noses to the ground, hooves clopping softly over stones. His dog, Bran, is already awake, circling the herd with quiet vigilance. Bran doesn't bark, he never needs to. His presence alone is enough to keep the flock in order. Today, Gareth will lead them higher. The lower pastures have been grazed thin. Now that summer is fully here, the mountain meadows are lush, waiting just beyond the fog. But the journey upward is not easy. The terrain is rocky. There are cliffs and gullies and thorny underbrush. Wolves have been seen nearby. One of the village boys swore he spotted a pair of eyes flashing in the tree line just last week. Gareth believes him. Still, the sheep must eat. And so Gareth wraps a strip of smoked meat in cloth, grabs his staff, and begins the slow march up the hillside. He says little as he walks. His thoughts stay quiet, inward, like the path itself. The sheep follow without question, guided by Bran and the rhythm of Gareth's footsteps. A bell tied to one ewe's neck rings softly with each movement, marking time like a heartbeat. By midday, they've reached the plateau. Here, the grass is rich and thick, wildflowers bloom in soft clusters. The air is cooler, cleaner, touched by pine and distant snow. Gareth settles near a flat stone and watches as the sheep fan out across the field. They move with purpose, but no urgency. This is the best part of the year. The quiet window when the flock is fattening. The weather is kind, and the wolves have not yet come too close. He pulls out his bread and meat, eats slowly, methodically. Then, with Bran resting nearby, he begins the real work, watching. A good shepherd doesn't wait for danger. He sees it before it arrives. Gareth scans the tree line, looks for movement in the grass, listens for any shift in sound. The smallest sign, a change in the bird song, the sudden silence of insects, can mean everything. He mends a torn piece of fleece. He realigns a hobbling lamb splint. He checks the salt lick he left last week. These are not dramatic acts, but they matter. Each small task preserves the life of the flock, and by extension, the livelihood of the village. As the sun lowers toward the west, Gareth begins the slow descent back toward the lower pens. The flock follows reluctantly, their bellies full, their movements lazy. Bran circles them again and again, nudging the stragglers, herding them with instinct and quiet precision. Back in the valley, the light fades to gold. Shadows stretch across the fields. Smoke begins to rise from chimneys, and the soft sounds of evening settle over Ashgrove. Children laughing, the clang of a pot, the lull of a low flute. Gareth guides the sheep into the stone-walled enclosure at the edge of the village. One by one, he counts them, 64, just as it should be. None lost, none lame. He nods once, pats Bran's head, and ties the gate closed. There is no feast waiting for him, no accolades, just a warm bowl of porridge left near the fire in the village commons. He eats standing, his back against the wall, eyes already on the darkening hills. Tomorrow he will rise again before the sun. Tomorrow he will lead the sheep once more into the wild. For Gareth, this is the life he knows best. Not the bustle of the village, not the crowd or the church, just him, the dog, and the flock. He doesn't mind the solitude. In fact, he finds peace in it. There's clarity in the open sky, honesty in the company of animals. People speak too much. The hills do not lie. As the stars appear and the crickets begin their nighttime song, Gareth stretches out beneath the stars, one hand on Bran's thick fur. The sheep rustle softly in their pen. All is quiet. All is safe. And though few in Ashgrove speak of the shepherd, though his name is not often sung or praised, it is his watchful eye, his silent strength, that guards them from what waits in the dark beyond the firelight. The village sleeps, and Gareth watches. Morning returns to Ashgrove with the same quiet persistence it always does. The fog lingers a little longer today, clinging to the rooftops like a sleeping cat. A single bell from the village chapel tolls once, its echo rolling gently through the waking fields. Beneath the earth, the seeds planted weeks ago are beginning to stir. Tiny roots stretch downward, green tips push up. Soon the fields will ripple with new life. But the rhythm of growth depends on more than just plows and prayers. It depends on those who tend, mend, and sustain, the silent labor of women like Isolde, and now the invisible strength of those who shape not crops but stories. Near the center of the village stands a boy, no longer quite a child, but not yet a man. Leofric, 12 years old, is perched on a wooden fence, his legs swinging idly as he watches the world begin. He has already chased off a flock of starlings this morning and gathered eggs from the coop behind his cottage. His hands smell faintly of hay and feathers, but today he's waiting for something else. At the far end of the village road, a cart creaks into view. Its wheels are patched, its canopy faded, but its arrival is anything but ordinary. The minstrel has returned. No one knows exactly where he lives or how far he travels. His name is Clem, or at least that's what he says. His beard is graying, his fingers calloused from string and wood. A flute dangles from his belt, and his satchel bulges with parchment, carved trinkets, and scraps of cloth that might once have been costumes. Word spreads quickly. Children abandon chores. Elders lean from windows. By the time Clem ties his horse near the commons, a small crowd has gathered. Leofric is already at the front. Clem says nothing at first. He merely unrolls a rug, settles onto a stool, and begins tuning his lute. The sound is soft, barely more than a hum, but it draws everyone in like a breeze before a storm. Then, in a voice both weathered and warm, Clem begins to speak. He doesn't shout, he doesn't hurry. He begins as though he's resuming a tale already known, pausing for effect, raising an eyebrow, letting silence stretch just long enough to stir curiosity. The villagers lean in. He tells of a goose who outwitted a baron, of a cat who guarded a hidden treasure, of a blacksmith who forged a sword so sharp it could divide a whisper. The stories are nonsense, of course, but glorious nonsense. They shimmer with color, twist with humor, and always end with a wink. Children laugh, mothers smile, even the blacksmith wipes a tear from his cheek when the tale turns sentimental. Leofric doesn't laugh, not because he's bored, but because he is listening too deeply. He memorizes the rhythm, the rise and fall, the choice of words. He wants to carry these stories in his own mouth. He wants to tell them back to the chickens, to the fields, to the stars. As the sun climbs, Clem switches to his flute, a high, lilting melody that dances over the rooftops. Someone brings him bread, someone else offers ale. No one asks for anything in return. His stories are payment enough. By afternoon, Clem begins his walk through the village, visiting homes, sharing shorter tales, small charms, riddles for the children. He hums as he moves, and wherever he goes, silence follows like a curtain being drawn. Leofric walks behind him, not speaking, just shadowing, and Clem lets him. As they reach the edge of the village, Clem stops at the well. He takes a sip of cool water and turns to the boy. "Ever told a story, lad?" Leofric hesitates. Then he nods. Clem smiles. "Then tell one now." The boy freezes. Villagers pause nearby. The air holds its breath, and then, haltingly, Leofric begins. It's a tale he's heard before, one of Clem's perhaps, but now it comes from his own mouth. His voice wavers, cracks, but he continues. He gets through it. At the end, no one claps, but Clem claps once, soft and certain. "That's how it starts," the minstrel says, and just like that, he leaves. By nightfall, Clem is gone again, his cart rolling off into the dark, his flute trailing behind like birdsong, but his stories remain. In the cottages, in the fields, in the dreams of children who now imagine not just toil, but magic. That evening, as Isolde tucks Mara into bed, the girl asks, "Do you think the blacksmith's sword could really cut moonlight?" Isolde doesn't answer. Instead, she smiles and begins to hum. Outside, Leofric sits beside the henhouse, whispering another story to the chickens. He doesn't need a lute. He doesn't need a costume. He only needs the quiet, the words, and a world willing to listen. In Ashgrove, not all labor is with hands. Some sow seeds in the mind, and tonight, as the village settles beneath a blanket of stars, the fields are full of dreams. The air hangs heavy with heat as midsummer settles over Ashgrove. The wheat, now waist-high, sways in slow golden waves. The barley hums with bees. Even the oxen move more slowly, their thick hides glistening beneath the weight of the noon sun. This is the season of watching, waiting, and worrying. The work of planting is behind them, and the harvest still lies ahead. For now, the fields must be guarded, the crops tended, the weeds pulled, and above all, the weather must hold. Every villager in Ashgrove knows what a single storm can do. A hailstorm can shred the wheat overnight. A week of rain can rot the roots. One summer, years ago, they say the wind flattened the fields just days before harvest. No one ate well that winter. And so, under this bright, cloudless sky, Tomric stands at the edge of the field with narrowed eyes and a furrowed brow. He chews a stalk of rye, not out of hunger, but out of habit. Nearby, his oxen rest in the shade of a tree, flies buzzing lazily around their ears. He's not alone. Bryce, Isolde's husband, sharpens a scythe beside him, testing the blade with the pad of his thumb. Edwin, the young sower, walks between the rows, checking for signs of disease. A few leaves curl oddly. He bends, inspects, but finds no bugs. Not yet. The village is tense. The fields are too important, too fragile. Children have been tasked with scarecrow duty, running, shouting, just waving rags on sticks to keep the crows from settling. Leofric leads the younger ones, chasing them like sheepdogs to the corners of the field, his own rag stained with ink from a failed story. Even Mara, little more than 6, has her job. She carries a wooden pail and sprinkles ashes between the rows to keep the slugs away. Her small feet leave shallow prints in the dry soil, and her song, off-key but earnest, drifts across the stalks like a charm. While the others tend the fields, Isolde tends to the village. She moves from door to door, checking on the elderly, sharing bread, trading herbs. Her hands are always busy, mending, stirring, kneading, but her eyes never stop watching the sky. It's too still today. No breeze, no clouds. The sun feels too close. By late afternoon, the first cloud appears, a thick smudge on the western horizon. Bryce squints at it. Not rain, he mutters, but trouble. Within the hour, the sky has begun to change. The air grows dense and the light shifts, becoming oddly yellow. The birds disappear. Dogs begin to bark. Isolde pulls Mara inside and begins shuttering the window with a practiced calm. It's just summer, she says gently, just noise and wind. But her hands move quickly. Out in the fields, the men hurry. Tomric calls for Leofric and the children. Edwin drives the oxen back toward the barn. Bryce ties down the grain stacks. All across the village, preparations unfold like choreography, silent, swift, solemn. Then, with a crack like splitting wood, the sky breaks open. Wind rushes through the valley, bending the tall stalks like reeds. The trees groan and sway, thunder booms, and the whole village holds its breath. But no rain falls, only wind. The gale lasts less than an hour, but it leaves its mark. One corner of the barley field lies flattened. Several scarecrows have vanished. A thatched roof near the chapel is torn open, but the worst has not come. At dusk, the wind dies and the air smells of dust and ozone. The villagers step out from their homes one by one, checking damage, counting blessings. Tomric walks the length of the field, dragging his hand along the bent stalks. He kneels, brushes the soil, and nods. Still rooted, he says. They'll stand again. That night, the village gathers around the large hearth in the commons. No one speaks of disaster. No one complains. Instead, they eat simply: boiled carrots, bread soaked in broth, cheese with cracked edges. The children fall asleep quickly, heads on laps or folded arms. The adults remain longer, sharing quiet glances and tired smiles. Edwin plays a soft tune on a reed pipe. Isolde hums beneath her breath as she spins wool. Even Gareth, who rarely leaves his hills, has come down to join them. He sits near the door, sipping ale, his dog Bran curled beneath his chair. Someone asks him if the sheep sense the storm. He nods. They moved downhill before the sky even changed. Animals know. Do you? Isolde asks gently. Gareth shrugs. I trust the sheep. Laughter bubbles quietly around the room, not loud, not forced, but real. A release. A reminder that fear has passed, that the stalks still stand, that life, for now, continues. Before they part, Tomric stands and speaks. Tomorrow we begin again. We tie up what's fallen, we pull what's broken, we make ready. Harvest is coming. No one claps, no one cheers. They simply nod. The promise of work is its own kind of comfort. As the villagers return to their homes, the moon rises, full and steady, watching over the fields like a silver sentinel. In her bed, Mara asks Isolde, "Will the wind come back?" Isolde brushes the girl's hair from her face. "Always," she says softly, "but we'll be ready." And outside, in the newly calmed fields, the barley lifts just slightly toward the stars. The fields of Ashgrove have begun to whisper. It's not the sound of wind through the wheat, nor the soft rustle of barley brushing against barley. It's something deeper, something older, the murmuring of a harvest drawing near. The green has turned gold. The stalks lean heavy with promise. Every breeze carries the scent of grain and dust. For the villagers, this is both a time of anticipation and a time of reckoning. They have waited, worked, and watched for months. Now, the window has opened, a narrow span of days when everything must be done before the rains come. If the timing is wrong, if a storm arrives too soon, if the reaping is slow, the crop could rot where it stands. This is no time for hesitation. Before the sun rises, Tomric is already awake. He sharpens his scythe with slow, deliberate strokes, each one part ritual, part necessity. The blade must be flawless. A dull edge wastes time and energy. His hands know the rhythm. He's done this every summer since he was strong enough to swing steel. Outside his cottage, others are stirring. Bryce emerges with a whetstone tucked into his belt. Edwin carries bundles of twine for tying sheaves. Isolde, though she won't be in the fields, wraps food in cloth, bread, onions, a piece of salted fish, and tucks it into baskets for the men. The women, too, have their roles. Once the grain is cut, it must be bound, gathered, stacked. There are no idle hands during harvest. Even Mara and Leofric are pressed into service. She carries water, he chases birds from the stubble, waving a wooden spoon like a sword. The reaping begins as the first light touches the fields. Tomric moves through the grain like a shadow, the curve of his blade slicing cleanly through the golden stalks. With each swing, a swath of wheat falls, neatly aligned behind him. The rhythm is relentless. Step, swing, pull, step again. Behind him, Bryce and Edwin gather the cut grain into bundles. They wrap each sheaf tightly, tying it with twine and stacking it upright to dry. It's hot work. The chaff clings to their arms and necks. The sun climbs and sweat darkens their tunics. But no one stops. There's no time to. By midday, the field is buzzing with labor. Dozens of villagers move in coordinated lines. Scythes glint in the light. Voices call out for twine, for water, for help with a heavy bundle. The air is thick with dust and pollen. Coughs and sneezes echo between strokes. Still, they push forward. In the distance, Gareth arrives with Bran and 2 other shepherds. They tether their sheep in the meadow and join the line of reapers without a word. In Ashgrove, harvest is not about whose field it is. It's everyone's concern. Leofric carries a basket of fresh bread from Isolde. The loaves are wrapped in cabbage leaves to stay moist. The workers eat while standing. No one sits. No one wants to stiffen up. The break is brief, and the blades resume their dance before the crumbs have settled. As the day wears on, the wheat piles grow. The field begins to change. No longer a uniform sea of gold, but a patchwork of stubble and standing grain. They are making progress. They are keeping ahead of the weather. Late in the afternoon, clouds gather in the west, high and white, but large. Tomric watches them while he sharpens his blade. "They're watching," he mutters. Bryce spits into the dust. "Let them watch. They'll wait." There's no fear in his voice, only grit. The sun begins to lower, casting long shadows across the cut rows. Some villagers begin tying up the last sheaves, others gather loose stalks and drop them into sacks. The work slows, not because the pace falters, but because exhaustion seeps into every limb. Tomric finally lowers his scythe. That's enough for today. There's no cheer, no applause. Just a collective exhale. Some sit where they stand, others slump against the bundles. Leofric brings water, and Bran flops into the dust with a grateful huff. The evening is quiet. As the sky shifts to pink and silver, the villagers walk back toward the village together. They move slowly, like soldiers after battle, tired but proud. Their clothes are stained, their arms ache, but there's satisfaction in every limp, every blister. In the commons, Isolde and the other women have prepared stew, onions, carrots, barley, and the last of the salted meat. No one speaks as they eat. Words feel too heavy. The only sounds are spoons against bowls and the occasional grunt of relief as a back stretches or a knee pops. Later, by the fire, Edwin tunes his pipe and plays a low, winding melody. It has no name. It's just the sound of summer fading, of work well done, of breath returning to a village that has spent the day sprinting against the rain. Mara falls asleep beside the hearth, her head in Isolde's lap. Leofric stares into the flames, hands still stained from twine and wheat. Gareth dozes upright, Bran curled at his feet. Tomric gazes out the open door. Outside, the field is quiet. The remaining wheat stands tall in the moonlight. Tomorrow they will cut more, then more again, until nothing is left but stubble and hope. And when the last sheaf is tied, the village will celebrate. But not tonight. Tonight, they rest. Not because the work is done, but because they know it must continue. And because in Ashgrove, the harvest is not a single act, but a season of endurance, of unity, of quiet, shared triumph. And it has only just begun. The next morning arrives as if the sun itself had remembered there was still work to do. No lingering mist, no chill breeze, just a wide stretch of golden light that falls cleanly across the village and fields of Ashgrove. The air smells of straw and sweat, of fresh-cut stalks and warm earth. It is a harvest day, and everyone knows it. Inside his small cottage, Edwin rises with a sore back and blistered hands. He doesn't complain. No one does. This is the cost of the harvest, and it must be paid in full. He wraps a clean strip of cloth around his palm, knots it tightly, and tucks a wedge of cheese into his satchel before stepping outside. The fields await. Already, Tomric is at work, his scythe flashing in slow, powerful arcs. He doesn't speak when Edwin joins him. He just nods once, acknowledgement, respect, partnership. Then he returns to his rhythm. Swing, step, breathe. Edwin joins the line, and the two men fall into a steady cadence, their movements carving neat rows through the tall grain. Behind them, Isolde and several other women tie the fallen wheat into sheaves. Their fingers are swift, practiced, their motions as vital as any blade. Each bundle is tied with twine and leaned upright to dry. Some are stacked into stooks, small teepee-like structures that shield the grain from unexpected rain. Every step is essential. Every bundle is food. Children run between the rows, collecting what the scythes miss, scattered stalks, dropped heads of barley. Leofric leads them like a shepherd, his voice hoarse from yesterday's shouting, but determined all the same. The little ones mimic him, shouting at imaginary birds and pretending their bundles are great treasures. By midday, the field is more than halfway done. The stacks grow taller, the village buzzes. But there is one task still ahead, the threshing. As the reapers continue cutting, several villagers move toward the threshing floor, a packed earth clearing behind the barn, hardened by years of use. There, the grain must be separated from the straw. It is dirty work, hot work, relentless work. Bryce picks up a flail, a wooden rod with a short chain attached to a second stick. He raises it high and brings it down onto a bundle of wheat, the dry heads cracking under the blow. Thud, thud, thud. The sound is rhythmic, almost musical, like a heartbeat echoing through the dust. Each strike loosens the kernels from their husks. Once beaten, the mixture of grain and chaff is scooped and tossed into the air with wide, shallow baskets. A light breeze helps carry away the lighter chaff, letting the heavier kernels fall cleanly into the waiting sacks below. Isolde joins in, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands quick and steady. Her face is flushed, her hair damp with sweat, but she smiles, quietly, fiercely. This, too, is part of feeding a village. Mara watches from a nearby bench, peeling apples for drying. Her small hands work carefully, and when a slice falls, Bran the shepherd dog is there to catch it. The dog has taken a liking to her. Wherever Mara sits, Bran is not far behind. By late afternoon, the threshing floor is covered in dust. The sacks are heavy with clean grain. And still, no one stops. They press on until the sun hovers low over the hills, the sky turning the color of ripe peaches. Then, slowly, tools are laid down, the scythes wiped clean, the baskets stacked. The villagers stretch aching muscles and blink dust from their eyes. Tomric walks to the edge of the field and looks back. Only a few rows remain. One more day, maybe two. They've done well. That evening, the villagers gather again in the commons. Tonight, there is music. Real music. Clem, the traveling minstrel, has returned just in time. No one saw him arrive, but there he is, tuning his lute, dust on his boots and a knowing smile on his face. He plays without fanfare, letting the notes rise gently over the crowd. The melody is soft, familiar, an old harvest tune, one that everyone knows but only he can truly play. Children hum, elders sway. Even Gareth, quiet and steady as ever, taps his foot in time. Then Clem sings. His voice is not perfect, but it carries. He sings of a harvest that failed and one that flourished. Of a plowman who married a baker's daughter. Of a goose who led a lost farmer home in the snow. The stories are half jokes, half truths, and all comfort. Later, as the stars appear, Tomric speaks to the village. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply stands, looking not at the people, but at the sacks of grain, the bundles stacked high like golden tents. We are not rich, he says. We are not free, but we have done what needed doing. A murmur of agreement moves through the crowd. He nods once. Tomorrow we finish. That night, the village sleeps deeper than it has in weeks. Mara dreams of fields that never end, where the wheat whispers secrets to those who listen. Leofric dreams of swords made from grain stalks, of birds that speak in riddles. Isolde dreams of her grandmother's kitchen, warm and bright and full of laughter. And Edwin, lying beneath the open sky beside the last row of uncut wheat, dreams of nothing at all. Just quiet, just rest. The kind earned only by those who have given all they have and asked for nothing in return. The final morning of harvest begins with silence. Not dread, not fear, just stillness. As if even the wind knows that this day is different. The village of Ashgrove does not stir all at once. Instead, it rises gradually, as one might stretch before the last step of a long journey. The birds are quieter. The sunlight falls like gold on the thatched roofs. The air smells of drying hay and the warm promise of bread. Tomric is the first to the field. He stands there for a long moment before lifting his scythe, not out of hesitation, but out of respect. This last patch of uncut wheat, no more than a narrow strip, is a reminder. Everything they have, everything they eat, everything they live on, begins here. Behind him, Bryce, Edwin, and a half-dozen other men join silently. No greetings are needed. They all know what today means. They tie their boots tighter, wrap rags around blistered palms, and begin the final sweep. The sound of blades through grain is different this time. Slower, sharper, reverent. Even the younger boys, Leofric and his friends, don't run or shout. They stand at the edge of the field, helping where needed, their laughter held in check. This is not a day for play. It is a day of finishing. In the village square, Isolde prepares the midday meal with quiet precision. She kneads the dough harder than usual, not in anger but in rhythm, matching the pace of the men in the field. Beside her, Mara crushes herbs in a wooden bowl. The scent of rosemary and wild onion fills the air. A pot of lentil stew simmers on the hearth, thick and fragrant. Loaves bake in the clay oven. Apples, sliced thin and dried in the sun, are carefully arranged on a plate. It's not a feast yet, but it is more than just sustenance. It is a promise. By noon, the last row falls. Tomric lets out a single breath and drives the blade into the earth. Not in anger, not to mark victory, but to give it rest. The others do the same. One by one, they lay their tools down. For the first time in days, their hands are empty. A cheer rises, not loud or wild, but deep and full. Relief, joy, fatigue, and something harder to name all mixed together. It is done. The villagers gather in the center of the field. They sit on overturned barrels, on sacks of grain, on stones and benches dragged from the chapel yard. Isolde and the other women arrive with baskets of food. The men wash their faces in buckets, rub the dust from their eyes, and let themselves breathe. The stew is ladled out, bread is torn and passed around, apples are shared. Someone uncorks a jar of blackberry wine that's been aging since the spring. For a little while, they are not farmers, not mothers or fathers or shepherds or carpenters. They are just people, grateful and grounded. As they eat, Gareth arrives from the hillside with Bran at his side. He carries a large sack slung over his shoulder. "Found these this morning," he says, pulling it open to reveal mushrooms, wild garlic, and a few bright clusters of berries. "Figured we'd have something fresh to finish with." Laughter greets him, not the exhausted kind from before, but real, belly-deep laughter. Isolde adds the garlic to a new pot. Mara sneaks a berry into her mouth before anyone can stop her. Then comes the music. Clem, the wandering minstrel, appears with a sly grin and his lute already strumming. He doesn't wait for silence. He begins to sing of wheat that sings in the moonlight, of a mouse that saved a harvest, of a king who traded his crown for a single honest loaf. The stories are ridiculous, but perfect. Even Tomric laughs, and Edwin claps along, and Leofric, wide-eyed, hangs on every word. As the sun begins to lower, someone starts a fire in the center of the field. Children gather kindling. The adults build a small altar of wheat sheaves nearby, not for worship, but for remembrance. A symbol, a way of saying we saw this season through. Clem plays slower now. The music softens. A few of the older villagers begin to doze. Others talk quietly. One couple dances barefoot in the dirt. Gareth pulls Leofric aside and shows him how to tell the age of grain by biting it. "Too soft," he says, "and it spoils. Too hard, and it breaks your teeth. What you want is that moment in between." Leofric nods solemnly, though he isn't entirely sure he understands. Mara sits in Isolde's lap and asks if they will do this again next year. "Yes," Isolde says, brushing the girl's hair from her face. "And the year after that, and the year after that. But what if it rains all summer? Then we save what we can. What if we're too tired? Then we rest in shifts. What if the wheat doesn't grow?" Isolde pauses. Then she says, "Then we grow something else." Night falls, but no one moves to leave. Not yet. The fire crackles, the field glows with warmth and ash, and the sound of people simply being together. Tomric rises at last and says only this: "We'll thresh the rest tomorrow." Everyone nods. Tonight is for the harvest. Tonight is for breathing. And as stars spill across the sky and the last note of Clem's lute fades into silence, the village of Ashgrove sleeps, not from exhaustion, but from peace. They have done what was needed, and for now, that is enough. The next morning arrives cooler, quieter. A soft breeze slips through the village, rustling the thatched roofs and causing the remaining stalks of wheat to sway gently, like bowing heads in a morning prayer. The fire in the center of the field has burned down to a warm heap of glowing coals, and the scent of ash still lingers in the air. Today is the beginning of threshing season, and though the reaping is done, no one in Ashgrove considers the work finished. Tomric is already at the threshing floor when the first rays of sun slide over the horizon. He stands for a moment, arms crossed, eyeing the packed earth square where generations of villagers have broken grain from chaff. It is sacred ground in its way, not for ceremony, but for survival. The others arrive in waves, Edwin carrying bundles of freshly dried wheat, Bryce with 2 large baskets slung over his shoulders, and Isolde, sleeves rolled, a cloth tied around her hair. Even Leofric walks proudly this morning, helping Gareth carry the flails, long wooden tools used to beat the grain loose. Everyone knows their task. No instructions are needed. A large wooden tarp is spread to catch the grain. The sheaves are laid out, flat and tight. The air is dry, perfect for the work ahead. Tomric lifts the first flail. Swing. It strikes the wheat with a dull, thudding crack. Again. Again. Soon, the rhythmic pounding fills the air like the deep pulse of a slow drum. One by one, the others follow. The sound becomes a pattern. 2 strikes, a shift, a pause, then 2 more. Dust rises, golden and soft, catching the light in lazy swirls. Threshing is both art and labor. Too soft, and the grain remains stuck. Too hard, and the kernels are crushed. Each swing must be precise, each movement measured. As the hours pass, the villagers trade positions. No one works without rest, but no one rests for long. Isolde teaches Mara and the other young ones how to gather the threshed grain into baskets, while Leofric is tasked with scooping it into the wide, flat trays used for winnowing. Winnowing requires patience. The mixture of grain and husk is tossed gently into the air, and the wind, or a slow movement of the tray, helps separate the light chaff from the heavier wheat. It is slow, dusty work, but when done well, it reveals clean, golden kernels, the food that will sustain the village. Midday arrives and the sun sits high. Sweat clings to every brow, arms ache, but no one complains. This labor is different. It is finishing work, polishing, honoring the effort that has come before. Under the large oak tree beside the threshing floor, a cloth is spread and the midday meal is served. Bread, fresh cheese, onion soup, and leftover berries from Gareth's harvest. The villagers eat with quiet satisfaction. Mara takes a piece of bread, stares at it for a long time, and says, "This was in the field." Isolde smiles. "It was, and now it's in your hand." The girl doesn't eat right away. She takes a moment, maybe for the first time, to understand what that means. Then she takes a bite. The afternoon brings more flailing, more sorting. But the pace is different now, softer, as if the village itself is beginning to exhale. They've survived the planting, the storms, the reaping. Now, each motion feels like sealing the promise they made to themselves in spring. As the final baskets of grain are carried into the large wooden granary at the edge of the village, Tomric and Bryce oversee the tally. Each sack is weighed, labeled, stacked neatly. There will be enough this year. Not just to eat, but to save, to trade, maybe even to brew. Inside the granary, the air is cool and still. The scent of grain is sharp, earthy, reassuring. Rows of sacks line the walls like sleeping soldiers. Leofric runs his hand along the edge of one and says quietly, "It's like a castle made of bread." Bryce grins. A fortress against hunger. Evening comes more quickly than expected. The final tasks are finished with care. The flails cleaned and hung, the threshing floor swept, the baskets stacked neatly by the barn. Ashgrove, for the first time in many weeks, is still. And that night, as the last streaks of sunset vanish behind the hills, the harvest bell is rung. It is not a loud bell. It hangs from a wooden beam beside the chapel, small and slightly tarnished. But its tone is clear, pure, and it carries. 1 toll for the beginning of planting, 2 for the first sheaf cut, 3 for the final threshing. Tonight, it rings 3 times. All across Ashgrove, candles are lit, windows glow. The smell of warm stew, cider, and roasted root vegetables fills the village. Though the harvest feast is set for tomorrow, tonight is a quiet celebration, an evening of simple gratitude. In the commons, the villagers gather once more. Some sing softly, others talk in low voices, hands wrapped around mugs of warm drink. Clem, ever present and ever welcome, plays a slow tune on his flute. It sounds like falling leaves, like closing doors, like the final line of a long story. Isolde holds Mara in her lap, stroking her hair. Leofric leans against Gareth, half asleep, a dog curled at his feet. Tomric and Bryce speak little, but their faces are brighter than any words they might share. Tonight, there are no plans, no duties, no lists, only rest. And as the stars rise high over Ashgrove, shining down on full barns, weary shoulders, and satisfied hearts, the village sleeps knowing this. They did not wait for miracles. They worked for them, and they are still here. Morning light spills gently over the rooftops of Ashgrove, but today no one rushes. No one grabs scythes. No one bends over stalks of wheat or rushes to check the skies. The work is done. Today is for celebration. The harvest feast is not declared by trumpet or decree. It simply begins, with the smell of cinnamon and honey wafting from kitchen hearths, with the slow echo of boots on stone as villagers carry baskets toward the commons, and with the rising laughter of children who, for the first time in weeks, are not tasked with chasing birds or gathering straw. In the center of the village, the long tables are being set. Not with fine linens or polished cutlery. Ashgrove is not that sort of place, but the care is unmistakable. Wooden boards are scrubbed clean, clay plates stacked neatly, mugs filled with fresh-pressed apple cider, still frothy and golden. Isolde directs with quiet grace, placing loaves of warm bread at each end of the table, brushing a speck of flour from her cheek. She's been baking since before dawn. With help from Mara, of course, who proudly announces to everyone passing by, "I kneaded the dough, all by myself." Mara's loaf is small and lopsided, but no one dares not taste it. At the edge of the commons, a small altar of thanks has been built. Wheat sheaves, apples, a pair of work gloves, a blackened flail handle. Simple offerings to the land, the labor, and the unseen things that protect good people and good soil. No priest comes to bless it. It is blessed by calloused hands and quiet hearts. Tomric arrives with a barrel on each shoulder, one cider, one ale. He sets them down with a grunt and a smile, then claps dust from his hands and begins helping the older children arrange firewood into a neat pyramid for the night's bonfire. As the sun climbs higher, Gareth appears from the hills, herding in 3 sheep, each decorated with flowers braided into their wool. Bran, his dog, wears a crown of rosemary and seems only slightly offended. Gareth says nothing as he lifts a sack of dried figs onto the table, but he nods once to Isolde. That is enough. By noon, the tables are overflowing. Trays of roasted carrots, bowls of barley stew, spiced pumpkin, and thick slices of goat cheese. One woman brings out pickled plums soaked in vinegar and honey. Another carries a pie so large, 2 men are needed to hold the board it rests upon. And then, without a signal or a speech, the feast begins. Laughter rolls from table to table, elbows bump, cups clink, crumbs scatter, but no one minds. This is not a feast of manners, it is a feast of survival, of triumph. Tomric raises a mug and shouts only one word, "Ashgrove!" The cheer is loud and true. Even Leofric, who usually eats with caution, fills his plate 3 times. He sits beside Clem the minstrel, who is stringing a new lute made from a wood gifted by the villagers. Clem eats slowly, contentedly, listening to stories rather than telling them. Edwin tells the tale of how he nearly fell asleep while winnowing grain and tossed a full basket directly into a goat's face. The laughter nearly overturns a pitcher. Bryce, full of cider, challenges anyone under the age of 10 to a race around the commons. He is promptly beaten by Mara, who rides Bran, the shepherd dog, halfway through the lap before tumbling into a pile of hay. There are no speeches, no scrolls, no declarations. The only words of note come later in the afternoon, when Isolde, wiping her hands on her apron, stands and says, "We have eaten well because we have worked well, and we will do it again next year together." Nothing more is needed. As the sun begins to dip, the villagers move toward the large fire pit in the center of the square. Dry wood has been piled high. Kindling is ready. Leofric steps forward with a small torch, lit from the bakery's hearth, the same fire that baked their first harvest loaf this morning. He touches the flame to the straw. The bonfire roars to life. Sparks leap into the air, caught in the wind, dancing like fireflies. Shadows flicker across familiar faces. Some begin to drum on the table, others sing. A few dance in pairs, in groups, even alone, lost in the joy of the moment. Clem takes up his lute, now tuned and humming. He plays a song no one knows at first, but by the second chorus, the whole village is singing. It's a tune about wheat taller than trees and ale that cures sorrow, and a girl who danced so well the moon refused to rise until she was done. Mara declares she'll dance like that, and she spins in the dust until she falls down giggling. As night deepens, the stars come out, bright, clear, countless. Gareth lies flat on his back, naming constellations to a circle of curious children. Isolde wraps a shawl around her shoulders and quietly watches the fire. Tomric snores softly on a bench, cider still in hand. Later still, Clem plays a softer tune, one of longing, of winter approaching, of remembering the green in the gray months to come. Leofric sits quietly, staring at the flames. Will it always be like this? He asks. No, Clem says without hesitation, but it was, tonight, and that's enough. The fire burns low, the songs fade, the children are carried home in tired arms, plates are left where they lie. No one worries, there is time to clean tomorrow. Tonight was about joy, and Ashgrove, for all its simplicity, has remembered how to hold it gently, to savor it. And as the last embers glow red in the ashes, the village sleeps again, safe, full, whole. The harvest has ended, but the story always continues. The days after the harvest feast settle like soft dust over Ashgrove, quiet, calm, and slow. The urgency that had driven every hand and foot for weeks fades gently into a more reflective pace. No one hurries now. There is no longer reason to. The fields once alive with golden grain and the sound of scythes slicing through stalks now lie flat and open, resting like a beast finally fed. Stubble catches the morning light in silver streaks, and the first hints of autumn tinge the leaves along the hedgerows. Tomric, as always, wakes early, though his body protests. He stands by the edge of his field with a mug of warm water, watching mist curl low across the earth. The silence isn't empty, it's full of memory. Of sweat and sun and the clang of tools, of shouted jokes, of the scrape of boots in soil. He breathes in deeply, then turns back to the cottage. There is still work to do, though it is quieter work now. Inside, Isolde stirs a pot of porridge while Mara brushes out her doll's yarn hair by the hearth. The girl hums a song she heard at the feast. One of Clem's, though she's added her own lines about dancing sheep and pie that sings. Clem himself is still in the village. Unusual. He's usually gone by now, off to another hamlet, another fire. But something about Ashgrove has slowed his departure. Perhaps it's the warm bread, or the quiet, or the way Leofric keeps following him around, asking questions about rhymes, chords, and why stories always start with someone leaving home. You'll understand, Clem tells him, when you do. And with that, he flicks his fingers over the lute strings and starts another song. Leofric listens, trying to catch the structure of it. He's begun carving a little flute of his own out of ash wood, copying what he's seen the older boys do. It's rough, and the notes wobble like newborn legs, but he practices when no one is listening. Meanwhile, the village begins to prepare for the long sleep, what the older folk call the months between harvest and planting. Food must be preserved, tools sharpened and hung, thatched roofs checked for leaks, warm clothes stitched from wool already spun and dyed during summer's end. Gareth spends his days walking the boundaries of Ashgrove's land with Bran. He inspects the fences, marks trees that may not survive the winter, and checks on the beehives down in the meadow. He rarely speaks, but when he does, the words are short and useful. Smoke the hive this week, he tells Isolde, then cover it. She nods. No thanks are needed. In Ashgrove, knowing someone speaks with care is thanks enough. As October settles in, the sky begins to lower. Clouds hang heavier, the wind tastes colder, and for the first time in months, the rain returns, not in a rush, but in long, gentle stretches that seem to cleanse the village after so much effort. Children jump in puddles, dogs track mud into kitchens, the fields soak, and yet the mood in Ashgrove never darkens, because there is peace in this pattern, trust in the turning wheel of the seasons, joy not just in reaping, but in resting. One evening, the village gathers again, this time not in the commons, but in the chapel. It is small and plain, with whitewashed walls and a heavy wooden door that creaks like it remembers every winter. A fire crackles near the front, and benches creak beneath familiar weight. Edwin reads the list of what's been stored in the granary. Sacks of wheat, barley, dried peas, and lentils. Isolde shares what's been preserved in jars, plums, beans, jam, pickles. Bryce offers the count of cider bottles sealed and stored in the root cellar. When he gets to 73, someone cheers. Afterward, Clem plays once more, though this time the songs are softer, ballads of snowlight and stories told around fires and the way even bare branches hold their beauty. Leofric stands near the door, flute in hand. At the end of one tune, Clem nods to him. "Well then," the minstrel says. Leofric gulps, steps forward and raises the flute. It squeaks, it cracks. The tune stumbles halfway through, but no one laughs. When he finishes, the room is quiet for a moment, then Tomric claps once. Isolde smiles, Gareth tilts his head, and Clem just says, "You'll get there." Later that night, Leofric sits beside the fire with his flute in his lap. Mara lies with her head in his shoulder, already dozing. He doesn't play again, not tonight, but he holds it like it matters, like a seed waiting for spring. And in the silence, he thinks about what it means to be a story keeper. Not a hero, not a farmer, just someone who remembers. The moon rises silver and full, shining down on a village that is full, content, and still. Ashgrove does not ask the world for anything. It simply listens, and when the wind blows, when the trees creak, when the last leaves fall and frost begins to touch the fields, the village is ready, not for war, not for glory, but for winter, and the soft, slow turning of time. The days after the harvest feast settle like soft dust over Ashgrove, quiet, calm, and slow. The urgency that had driven every hand and foot for weeks fades gently into a more reflective pace. No one hurries now. There is no longer reason to. The fields, once alive with golden grain and the sound of scythes slicing through stalks, now lie flat and open, resting like a beast finally fed. Stubble catches the morning light in silver streaks, and the first hints of autumn tinge the leaves along the hedgerows. Tomric, as always, wakes early, though his body protests. He stands by the edge of his field with a mug of warm water, watching mist curl low across the earth. The silence isn't empty. It's full of memory, of sweat and sun and the clang of tools, of shouted jokes, of the scrape of boots in soil. He breathes in deeply, then turns back to the cottage. There is still work to do, though it is quieter work now. Inside, Isolde stirs a pot of porridge, while Mara brushes out her doll's yarn hair by the hearth. The girl hums a song she heard at the feast. One of Clem's, though she's added her own lines about dancing sheep and pie that sings. Clem himself is still in the village. Unusual. He's usually gone by now, off to another hamlet, another fire. But something about Ashgrove has slowed his departure. Perhaps it's the warm bread, or the quiet, or the way Leofric keeps following him around, that asking questions about rhymes, chords, and why stories always start with someone leaving home. "You'll understand," Clem tells him, "when you do." And with that, he flicks his fingers over the lute strings and starts another song. Leofric listens, trying to catch the structure of it. He's begun carving a little flute of his own out of ash wood, copying what he's seen the older boys do. It's rough, and the notes wobble like newborn legs, but he practices when no one is listening. Meanwhile, the village begins to prepare for the long sleep, what the older folk call the months between harvest and planting. Food must be preserved, tools sharpened and hung, thatched roofs checked for leaks, warm clothes stitched from wool already spun and dyed during summer's end. Gareth spends his days walking the boundaries of Ashgrove's land with Bran. He inspects the fences, marks trees that may not survive the winter, and checks on the beehives down in the meadow. He rarely speaks, but when he does, the words are short and useful. "Smoke the hive this week," he tells Isolde, "then cover it." She nods. No thanks are needed. In Ashgrove, knowing someone speaks with care is thanks enough. As October settles in, the sky begins to lower. Clouds hang heavier, the wind tastes colder, and for the first time in months, the rain returns. Not in a rush, but in long, gentle stretches that seem to cleanse the village after so much effort. Children jump in puddles, dogs track mud into kitchens, the fields soak, and yet the mood in Ashgrove never darkens because there is peace in this pattern. trust in the turning wheel of the seasons, joy not just in reaping but in resting. One evening, the village gathers again, this time not in the commons but in the chapel. It is small and plain, with whitewashed walls and a heavy wooden door that creaks like it remembers every winter. A fire crackles near the front, and benches creak beneath familiar weight. Edwin reads the list of what's been stored in the granary: sacks of wheat, barley, dried peas, and lentils. Isolde shares what's been preserved in jars: plums, beans, jam, pickles. Bryce offers the count of cider bottles sealed and stored in the root cellar. When he gets to 73, someone cheers. Afterward, Clem plays once more, though this time the songs are softer, ballads of snowlight and stories told around fires light and the way even bare branches hold their beauty. Leofric stands near the door, flute in hand. At the end of one tune, Clem nods to him. "Well then," the minstrel says. Leofric gulps, steps forward, and raises the flute. It squeaks, it cracks. The tune stumbles halfway through, but no one laughs. When he finishes, the room is quiet for a moment. Then Tomric claps once. Isolde smiles. Gareth tilts his head, and Clem just says, "You'll get there." Later that night, Leofric sits beside the fire with his flute in his lap. Mara lies with her head in his shoulder, already dozing. He doesn't play again, not tonight, but he holds it like it matters, like a seed waiting for spring. And in the silence, he thinks about what it means to be a story keeper, not a hero, not a farmer, just someone who remembers. The moon rises silver and full, shining down on a village that is full, content, and still. Ashgrove does not ask the world for anything. It simply listens. And when the wind blows, when the trees creak, when the last leaves fall and frost begins to touch the fields, the village is ready, not for war, not for glory, but for winter and the soft, slow turning of time. Snowfall deepens over Ashgrove. It is no longer the soft dusting of early frost, but thick, steady curtains of white that blanket the village roofs and blur the edges of the world. Paths must be cleared daily now. Wood piles shrink, windows grow tighter with frost, and every breath indoors clouds the glass. And still no one complains. Winter has its rhythm, and in Ashgrove, rhythm is life. Mornings begin slowly. No bells are rung, no orders called. The light comes late and thin, painting long shadows across the floors. In each home, the day begins with fire, tending it, feeding it, keeping it alive. Fire is no longer just warmth, it is center. In Isolde's home, Mara wakes each morning to the crackle of kindling and the smell of cinnamon oats. She no longer asks why the days are so short or the air so cold. She knows now. Winter isn't something to escape, it's something to move with. While Isolde cooks, Mara feeds the hens, gathers snow in a bucket for melting, and lays out a small piece of bread on the windowsill for the sparrows. "So they don't forget where we are," she says. Isolde smiles but says nothing. In Tomric's cottage, things are quieter. He speaks little these days, content to let the snow muffle the world around him. He sharpens tools, mends harnesses, and watches the tree line with an old hunter's eye. His thoughts, like the trees, are rooted, still. Sometimes Clem joins him, not with song, but with silence. They share tea and warmth, two men who don't need words to understand winter's language. Leofric spends more time inside now, curled near the fire with his little flute. He's learned 3 full songs, simple ones, but his fingers no longer stumble. Clem listens when he plays and never corrects. When Leofric finishes, Clem only says, "Again." Not as punishment, but as invitation. One snowy afternoon, Leofric brings his flute to the granary, where Bryce and Edwin are taking inventory of what remains. "We'll make it," Bryce mutters, running his hand along the sacks. "Just barely if the snow holds steady." "It always does," Edwin replies. Leofric doesn't interrupt. He just plays. A light tune, something like the sound of water under ice or wind through pine needles. The older men don't say a word, but when he finishes, Edwin says, "Play that again at winter's end." Might make the grain grow faster. Leofric glows with quiet pride. As weeks pass, winter nights continue, each one different, each one sacred. One evening, the gathering is held in Gareth's barn. Blankets are laid over bales of hay, and the animals are unusually quiet, as if they, too, know something special is happening. The fire crackles in an iron drum, and Bran lies in a circle of children, his tail thumping slowly. Gareth tells no stories. He listens. But when Leofric finishes his latest tale about a fox who swallowed a star and had to return it by climbing to the moon, Gareth raises an eyebrow and says, "Sounds like nonsense," then adds, "The good kind." The children giggle. Snowstorms come and go, sometimes fierce, shaking the shutters and piling drifts high against the doors. On those nights, no one travels. The village becomes a series of islands glowing faintly in the white sea. But they are not afraid. They have food, they have fire, they have each other. In one such storm, Isolde gathers the children and pulls down a long-forgotten box of fabrics. Old cloaks, discarded curtains, worn aprons. "Tonight," she says, "we become someone else." They spend the evening crafting masks, a rabbit, a knight, a river spirit with glittering eyes. Mara makes a crown from spoon handles and declares herself queen of the snowfall. Leofric, ever the quiet one, makes a mask of simple white with a single feather pressed into the side. "What are you?" Mara asks. "A wind," he says. "That listens." When the storm breaks the next day, the village emerges blinking, yawning like a bear from hibernation. Paths are dug again. Wood is gathered. And yet something feels stronger now. The storm did not defeat them. It tested them and found them whole. That night, Clem sings a song none of them know. It is in another language, perhaps older, perhaps made up. It speaks of a fire that burns in snow and footsteps that never vanish no matter how many storms fall. When he finishes, no one claps. They simply sit and let the warmth settle. Outside, the moon glows behind thin clouds, and the snow gleams like a field of stars. Inside, the village of Ashgrove breathes as one. The darkest part of winter has passed, and though they cannot yet see spring, they can feel it. Not in the air, but in each other. The air is still cold, but it carries something different now. Beneath the blanket of snow, beneath the quiet rhythm of frost-covered days, change is stirring. It doesn't come loudly, not in a rush of wind or a sudden thaw, but in moments, small, unnoticed by the world beyond Ashgrove, yet deeply felt by those who live within its snow-lined borders. One morning, Mara wakes early and sees the first drop of water sliding down the window pane. She presses her nose to the cold glass and whispers, "It's melting." Outside, a thin sheen of ice clings to the eaves, but the snow on the roofs begins to soften. Drips fall from branches. Somewhere in the forest, a trickle of water reappears beneath a frozen stream. The villagers notice it too. Isolde begins airing the linens, one by one, hanging them near the hearth to catch not just heat but light. She hums while she works, an old melody that no one taught her, yet everyone knows. Tomric, quietly and without comment, oils his boots and rebinds the handles on his tools. He doesn't say it aloud, but the muscles in his hands seem to know. The time of rest is nearing its end. In the evenings, the winter nights continue, but the stories begin to shift. Where once they were about survival, about beasts in snow and flickers of fire in long tunnels, now they speak of beginnings. One night in the chapel, with the fire burning lower than usual, Clem begins a story with a sentence no one has heard all winter. When the first flower bloomed in the field of bones, even the wind dared not breathe too loud. The villagers lean forward. His tale is one of a forgotten kingdom buried under 1,000 winters, where a single child planted a seed because she had nothing else left. It is not about the bloom itself, but about the waiting, the silence before, the faith required. And by the end, every listener understands the story is about them. After the gathering, as the candles are snuffed and cloaks pulled tight against the night, Leofric walks beside Clem. He doesn't speak, he doesn't have to. Instead, he raises his flute and plays a new song, soft, rising, hopeful. It is not polished, not perfect, but it is forward. In the days that follow, preparations begin in earnest, not frantic, not rushed, but steady. The seed shed is cleaned, the empty baskets are patched, so the broken wheelbarrow is finally fixed. Gareth returns from a journey beyond the woods with news. The river has begun to run again. The ice cracked like thunder, he says, rubbing his beard. She's waking up. That afternoon, the children race through the village with sticks pretending to be plows. Mara declares herself the queen of the first sprout and insists that Leofric be her royal musician. He doesn't argue, he simply plays. The mood in Ashgrove begins to lift, not from joy alone, but from readiness. They have done what they must. They have endured the deep dark, and now they begin again. One evening, under a sky soft with a hint of blue, the villagers gather not for a feast, but for something older, the planting fire. It is an old ritual, older than memory, perhaps even older than the chapel stones. A bonfire is lit not to warm, but to bless. Into it each family casts a token, a bit of last season's straw, a handful of saved seed, a worn tool, or a scrap of song. Each offering says the same thing: we're ready to begin again. Tomric tosses in a tiny sheaf of wheat bound with twine, Isolde a ribbon once tied to her herb satchel, Gareth places a branch from the tree that fell during the first storm. Even Leofric, shy but steady, drops a feather into the flames, and as the fire rises, it does not roar, it whispers. Its light dances across faces now free of fear, across hands calloused but proud, across children who will not remember hunger this year, across storytellers, builders, planters, and keepers. Clem plays one final tune that night. He doesn't name it, but it sounds like ice melting, like the earth breathing in for the first time, like footsteps toward something new. Later, as the fire dies down and the stars blink awake overhead, Mara curls into Isolde's lap and asks, "Is this spring yet?" Isolde strokes her hair. "Not quite," she says, "but it's near enough to call." The village sleeps that night, not as they did in the darkest days, not curled in against the cold, but stretched out, arms loose, hearts a little lighter. And above them, high in the branches where snow still clings in thin layers, a bird sings, only once, but it is enough. Dawn breaks earlier now, not by much, perhaps a finger's width of sunlight on the cottage wall, but enough for Ashgrove to notice. Enough for Isolde to smile faintly as she kneads dough beside the hearth and see that no candle is needed this morning. The light is returning, one gentle breath at a time. Outside, the snow has softened into patches with muddy paths forming between the cottages. Children walk carefully through them, laughing when the slush reaches their boots. The world is beginning to drip, to loosen, to wake. And so are the villagers. Tomric, never one for speeches, is the first to begin turning soil. Not the whole field, just a small strip near the edge where the sun hits longest. He works slowly, thoughtfully, his hands remembering what his mind already knows. The ground is wet, but not frozen. It yields. It listens. Word spreads without need for words. By mid-morning, Gareth has joined him, staking out the corners of the barley plot. Bryce appears with the wheelbarrow, fixed and freshly greased. Edwin brings a crate of seeds wrapped in oilcloth, kept safe all winter in the cool dark. When Isolde arrives, apron still flour-dusted and sleeves rolled high, she carries with her the first 2 rows of dried garlic bulbs, ready to be split and set into the thawing ground. This is not planting day, not officially, but it has begun, and with it comes the first laughter of spring. The children run circles around the planters, pretending to be crows and foxes. Mara insists she can hear the roots stretching. Leofric, always watching, pulls out his flute but doesn't play. Not yet. He listens instead. To the wind, to the breath of soil, to the waiting silence. That evening, the fire in the commons is relit, not for warmth, but for gathering. The benches are brought out, bread is shared, and someone, no one remembers who, starts humming a planting tune. Clem smiles. Now that's how you know. He joins the hum with a lute, picking a light rhythm that rises like a seed pushing up through earth, and slowly, almost shyly, voices join. No harmony, just a single thread of song carried by many hands. As the music fades, Leofric finally steps forward. This one's new, he says softly, cheeks pink with cold and nerves. He raises the flute and plays. The tune is simple, bare, but it carries the rhythm of footsteps on thawed ground, the flutter of wings, the hush between frost and bloom. When he finishes, there is no applause, only quiet. Then Clem says, "Now we're ready." The next day, the first official planting begins. There is no parade, no flags, just boots in the earth, hands in the soil, backs bending with purpose. Rows are marked, seeds tucked gently into place, garlic, then onions, later cabbage, lentils, and barley, carrots, turnips, the crops of patience and memory. Ashgrove knows how to wait. The weather shifts slowly, teasing. Snow falls once more, brief and soft, but the village does not stop. They cover the beds with straw. They nod to each other with quiet knowing. Spring is not a promise made with flowers. It is made with faithful work. Each day now is filled with motion. Fence posts are mended. The granary is swept and inventoried. New ropes are twisted. Wool is carted for trade. And still, the winter nights continue, but they are different now. Lighter, more playful. The stories have changed. Clem tells a tale about a crow who wanted to marry a sunbeam. Mara retells the story of the fox and the star, but this time the fox doesn't return the light. She keeps it and builds a village out of its fire. Even Tomric, silent through most winters, shares a memory about a year so rainy that the ducks nested in the grain silo and wouldn't leave until midsummer. Laughter comes easier now. Not forced, not loud, but real. And in between the stories, Leofric plays, sometimes alone, sometimes with Clem. Once, even with Mara banging 2 wooden spoons together in what she swore was rhythm. "She's got spirit," Clem grins. "She's got noise," Isolde replies, but doesn't stop her. One evening, while cleaning out the seed shed, Gareth finds a sack marked with a faded emblem, a crest no one recognizes. Inside, a handful of old sunflower seeds, not enough to feed, but enough to try. He brings them to Isolde. "These won't help our bellies," he says. She holds one in her palm. "Maybe not," she replies, "but they'll feed the sky." They plant them by the path that leads to the chapel, just a single row, for beauty and for reminder. Because Ashgrove, for all its labor and rhythm, knows that the soul needs more than bread. It needs color, hope, and something tall enough to catch the light even when the days grow dark again. As the week ends, the fields lie stitched with careful rows. The wind carries the scent of turned soil and ash and green things not yet born, and the village, once wrapped in snow and silence, now walks with lighter steps. Ashgrove is not new, but it is beginning again, and that is enough. The days grow longer now, not by minutes but by feeling. Sunlight lingers like a guest who has learned to stay past supper, casting a warm golden haze over the roofs of Ashgrove and turning puddles into mirrors that reflect children's laughter and the slow rhythm of spring. The earth is still cool beneath the villagers' boots, but it no longer resists. Each morning, it gives a little more. Moisture loosens, roots push deeper, and the first hints of green emerge from the soil like tiny promises. Isolde kneels in her garden one morning, brushing back a layer of straw mulch to reveal a new sprout. She doesn't say anything, but her hand lingers, gently cupping the leaf as if greeting an old friend. Beside her, Mara watches with wide eyes. "Will it be food?" the girl asks. "It will be life," Isolde replies. Elsewhere, Tomric hauls fresh timber to repair the shed roof, assisted by Edwin, who grumbles more than he lifts, but lifts all the same. The two speak little, but between their steady work and the creak of rope and wood, a quiet understanding grows. Down by the brook, the sound of flowing water has returned in full, lively and fast, full of thaw and song. Gareth walks the banks with Bran, noting where the water has carved new paths, where trees have shifted, where rocks have reappeared from their icy slumber. It is a season of returning. Even Clem, who once seemed like a wandering breeze too restless to stay, remains in Ashgrove, his boots firmly by the fire and his lute ever within reach. "I've had spring in many places," he says to Leofric one evening, "but there's something about this one. It listens. Leofric nods. He understands more now, not just of stories and notes, but of rhythm, of silence, of waiting. His music has changed too. It's lighter now, curious. His fingers test new notes. He begins improvising, small variations that mimic the wind, the call of birds, the rustle of wheat dreams not yet grown. The villagers notice. Sounds like the trees talking, says Gareth after hearing a piece Leofric plays in the orchard. Sounds like the year turning, Isolde adds softly. And so, the boy begins to play for the crops, not as ritual, not as command, but as gift. He walks the rows in the early light, flute in hand, letting the breath of his instrument settle into the furrows and beds. He plays for the seeds, for the roots, for the promise of food and flowers and all things not yet visible. Will they grow faster if you play? Mara asks, skipping beside him. No, Leofric says, but maybe they'll feel less alone. Mara thinks about this, then adds, I think I'd grow better if someone played music for me. That afternoon, the village gathers for spring cleansing, a simple ritual with no priest, no scripture, just hands and soap and laughter. Floors are scrubbed, chimneys cleared, walls brushed with whitewash made of ash and lime, not because they're filthy, but because spring asks for space, for breath. The children hang woven ribbons in the trees, green and yellow and pale blue, fluttering like bits of sky. Mara declares them wind catchers for good luck, and no one argues. Clem finds an old drum in the chapel attic. It's cracked, but still sings. That evening, he leads a procession through the village. Nothing formal, just footsteps, rhythm, and voices raised in song. The beat echoes down the paths, and villagers join one by one until the line becomes a spiral of sound and joy winding through Ashgrove like a living melody. Tomric does not sing, but he stands by his door and watches with a smile, one hand resting on the edge of the frame like he's remembering something long gone and sweet. That night, during the spring fire, the villagers gather once more. This fire is not for blessing or warmth or harvest. It is for letting go. Each person tosses something small into the flames, a broken tool, a worn scrap of cloth, a worry whispered too many times. There is no chant, no instruction, just flame and sky and release. Leofric drops a worn reed from his first flute. Mara drops a drawing she said wasn't pretty enough. Even Isolde offers a small cloth embroidered with her mother's initials faded from time. She taught me to make space, she says, so now I do. As the fire burns low, Clem plays a song with no words. The villagers sway in silence. A few weep, not from sorrow, from something older, something like truth. And when it ends, no one claps. Instead, they sit a moment longer, letting the hush settle around them like dew. When they rise, the stars have come, and in their places, every villager leaves lighter, more open, more ready. Ashgrove, once buried in snow, now breathes in full. It is not yet time for bloom or harvest, but the ground is awake, the hearts are clear, and the village stands together, waiting, not for miracles, but for what they will grow with their own hands, their own stories, and their own songs. The first flowers do not announce themselves. They do not burst into color like parades or shout their arrival with fanfare. They simply appear, quiet, delicate, almost shy. A single crocus by the chapel's foundation, its purple head bowed beneath a bead of melting frost. A cluster of snowdrops peeking through a forgotten patch of straw behind the barn. Yellow dandelions gathering along the fence behind the bakery, drinking in the midday sun. Ashgrove notices. It always does. Mara is the first to say it out loud. She comes racing into the cottage barefoot, her cheeks flushed and her hands muddy, clutching a half-crushed bloom in her palm. "They're here," she cries. "The little ones with the funny faces." Isolde looks up from the hearth, wiping her hands on her apron. "Slow down, child. You'll track half the spring into my kitchen." But Mara's eyes are glowing. She spins in a circle and then tugs at Isolde's sleeve until the older woman gives in and follows her out. There, just outside the door, beneath the sun-warmed stone where the snow melted first, a patch of crocuses rises like a miniature choir. Purple, white, yellow, thin stems swaying gently in the breeze as if nodding in greeting. Isolde kneels beside them. She does not pluck them. She simply rests her hand lightly on the earth near their roots, as though listening. "They came early this year," she says quietly. Mara kneels beside her. "No," she whispers. "They didn't come. They woke up." That afternoon, without plan or summons, the village begins to walk. It starts with one or two. Bryce stepping out with his wife to check the orchard paths. Edwin pausing midway through stacking wood to follow the trail down past the fields. Tomric, with Bran trailing behind, silently joining the winding line of villagers who simply begin to wander. There's no feast, no announcement, just a shared sense of movement, of awakening. They walk the outer paths between the gardens and the still dormant fields, stopping to point out the signs. Buds forming on branches, sap dripping from the trees, moss regreening on the rocks. The air is not yet warm, but it is softer, kinder. Clem hums softly as he walks beside Leofric. "Some say the first flower is a message," he murmurs, "not from gods or ghosts, just from the earth." Leofric glances at him. "What does it say?" Clem doesn't answer immediately. He stops near a patch of violets and lets the wind brush past his shoulders before replying. "It says, 'I'm still here.' Are you?" Leofric says nothing, but something in his chest tugs. They pass by the barley field where Tomric has been slowly, methodically driving new stakes into the thawing soil. He nods once, never pausing in his task. His hands move with memory, not instruction. He doesn't need to be told it's time. His bones already know. That evening, the chapel bell rings once, not to gather the village, not for worship or warning, just once. One clean note across the air, like a line drawn between winter and spring. In its echo, the world feels quieter. Inside the chapel, Gareth adjusts a crooked candlestick near the altar. He has said little all day, but when he returns home, he tells Bran the bees are back. And though no one else hears him, the hound gives a single soft chuff, as if in reply. The week unfolds gently. The hum of life rises, not in a sudden crescendo, but with the slow, sure certainty of a rising tide. Bees appear near the hedges, birds flit through the orchard, children trail muddy footprints through the village square. Preparations for Blossom Night begin. It is not a grand celebration, not a festival with banners and horns. It is something older, something more intimate, a night for observing what is still fragile, still small, still becoming. Each family chooses a doorway, a windowsill, or a fence post to decorate. Wreaths are woven from willow and ivy. Sprigs of early blooms are tucked into corners. Some hang colored ribbons from tree limbs. Others craft garlands from last season's corn husks and dried grass. Mara decides to decorate the goat pen. "They deserve to feel pretty too," she says. Isolde laughs and helps her tie a bow around the largest goat, who appears unimpressed but tolerant. Clem finds an old drum in the chapel's attic, a cracked thing with a faded hide, but still capable of carrying a beat. That evening, he begins a procession. It starts with him, humming as he taps the rhythm. Then Leofric joins, his flute lifting above the drum like wind through tall grass. Then others come. Mara with her wooden spoons, Gareth clapping slowly, Tomric with a hollowed gourd turned into a makeshift shaker. Soon, the village winds together in a loose spiral, dancing down the central path. There is no choreography, just motion, just music, just joy, and laughter, real laughter. When the music fades and the villagers settle on benches and steps and patches of soft earth, Clem asks for silence. "Tonight," he says, "we hang our wreaths not to show what we have, but what we hope." Each person places their wreath, some simple, some intricate, all meaningful. Even Leofric, usually hesitant in crowds, steps forward. His wreath is rough, a little lopsided, petals uneven, but he hangs it on the door of the granary with great care. Isolde places hers above the bakery window. Gareth hangs his from a tree. Mara tucks hers between two fence rails and says, "This one is for things that haven't grown yet." That night, candles are placed in every window. No one speaks of it. No one planned it. But as dusk falls, the The village glows, soft gold flickering behind every pane, like stars that have come to rest close to the ground. They gather one more time beneath the great elm at the village's edge. There are no speeches, no songs, only stillness, the kind that holds meaning, the kind that listens. And though no one says it, each villager feels it. Something has shifted, not in the wind, not in the ground, but in them. Ashgrove, once blanketed in snow and silence, now pulses with quiet life. They do not call it spring, they do not call it beginning, they simply call it now. The rain comes not with thunder, but with patience. It arrives as a hush, barely more than a mist at first, settling softly on rooftops and soaking into soil already loosened by thaw. Ashgrove does not flinch. It welcomes the water the same way it welcomed the sun, the snow, the silence, gently, gratefully. Each morning now begins with the soft patter of droplets tapping window panes, like fingers urging the village awake. The air smells different, darker, deeper, rich with the promise of growth. Isolde is up before the first bell of birdsong. She opens the shutters just enough to let the light in, then moves to the hearth where tea is already steeping. She watches Mara sleep, tangled in a blanket near the warm stone floor, one hand curled around her woven rabbit doll. There is peace in the rain, Isolde thinks, a kind of stillness that allows things to root. Later, when the girl wakes, she helps Isolde prepare seed packets for the next round of planting. They sort the bulbs in pouches with care, laying them out across the table like jewels. Beetroot, cabbage, leeks, wild spinach, and tiny paper-skinned onion sets. Are these the ones that cry when you cut them? Mara asks. Isolde smiles. Only if you forget to thank them first. Outside, the fields are slick with mud. Tomric does not mind. He moves steadily, boots thick with earth, sleeves rolled high. The rain soaks through his cloak, but he doesn't break stride. He works alone this morning, not because he must, but because sometimes solitude is sacred. Each row he marks is measured not just in steps, but in seasons. He remembers where the shadows fall, where the frost lingers longest. These fields have fed him, buried his grief, heard his silence. They know him. By mid-morning, others have joined him. Gareth carries the seed bags. Edwin arrives with a spade over one shoulder and a flask of elderflower water tucked under his coat. Clem appears last, whistling softly, the rhythm of his tune matching the tempo of the falling rain. Together, they work without need for conversation. They know what must be done. Near the village edge, beneath a grove of poplars, Leofric sits on a mossy stone with his flute across his knees. He does not play, not yet. He listens. Rain has its own song, its own tempo, its own time. He closes his eyes and counts, not numbers, but heartbeats, droplets, breaths. Each one is different, but somehow they all belong to the same rhythm. Eventually, he lifts the flute and begins to play. The melody is slow and wandering, like footsteps through puddles. It rises and falls like water slipping off leaves. The notes are not meant to be remembered, they're meant to be felt. Mara hears it from across the village. She pauses mid-step, a bundle of kindling in her arms, and smiles. He's getting better, she says to no one. By late afternoon, the rain grows heavier. The villagers retreat indoors, boots kicked off at thresholds, cloaks hung by the hearth to dry. The scent of damp wool and fresh bread fills the homes. Isolde begins preparing soup, root vegetables and barley, thick with herbs. Mara chops with careful focus, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she mimics Isolde's movements. You're learning, Isolde says. I'm becoming, Mara replies, and it is true. In every home, something new is stirring. Bryce and his wife polish the cider press in preparation for early apples. Clem strings new chords on his lute. Edwin takes down his ledger, flipping past pages of winter inventory and beginning a new section labeled Spring Growth. It is a quiet day, but it is not idle. At dusk, the rain eases. The sky breaks open for a moment, just enough to show a single strand of pale gold light filtering through the clouds. Clem steps out onto the porch of the chapel with his lute in hand. He strums a few notes and watches as Leofric approaches from the poplars, flute still in hand, eyes bright despite the damp. They play together, not because anyone asked them to, but because something in the evening asked for sound. The song begins as a duet and ends as something else. Something that belongs to Ashgrove. Windows open. Children lean against doorframes. Even Tomrick, wiping mud from his boots, pauses to listen. The music doesn't speak of joy or sorrow or longing. It speaks of rooting, of what it means to stay. After the song, no one claps. No one needs to. The silence that follows is full of thanks. That night, as candles are lit and shutters closed, Ashgrove settles not into sleep, but into readiness. They know what the rain means. It means that everything is beginning again, not just in the fields, but in them. In the quiet between thunder, in the hands that need, dig, sow, and hold, in the songs that rise without request, and in the hush that follows, soft as moss, sure as seed. Tomorrow they will rise and work again. Not because they must, but because it is what they do, what they are. Ashgrove is not rushing towards summer. It is not reaching for harvest. It is growing together, one raindrop, one breath, one quiet step at a time. The morning after the rain, the earth breathes steam. Mist clings low to the fields, curling like smoke from the mouths of sleeping giants. Dew beads on every blade of grass, and the trees seem to shimmer, their branches heavy with droplets. The village of Ashgrove wakes slowly, not because it is tired, but because it is content. Inside the bakery, the oven glows. Isolde has risen early to knead dough, the rhythmic slap of her hands on the wooden table matching the soft thump of rising footsteps outside. She glances toward the window where the mist swirls past like an old memory. Mara appears behind her, sleepy-eyed and wild-haired. "I dreamed of roots," the girl mumbles. "They were glowing, and they whispered." Isolde smiles. "What did they say?" Mara shrugs. "They didn't speak like we do. But I think they said, 'Keep going.'" Outside, the village does just that. Tomrick sharpens his tools with calm precision. His blade meets the whetstone in slow, practiced arcs. He pauses now and then, not to rest, but to listen. In the distance, the forest creaks, not with wind, but with life. Edwin is already pacing the far end of the planting rows, scribbling notes into a little bound book. He murmurs to himself as he walks. Measurements, timings, seedling progress. 2 days early this year, he mutters, maybe 3. Gareth watches him with a crooked smile from atop a fence post he's just finished mending. "Do numbers grow food?" he asks. "Not by themselves," Edwin replies, "but they remind us how to help it grow." By midday, the mist has lifted, revealing a sky so blue it almost hurts to look at. The village basks in it. Buckets are brought out, laundry strung across lines, tools laid out in rows to dry. The air smells of pine, damp wood, and fresh beginnings. Leofric takes his flute down to the riverbank. He doesn't play right away. Instead, he lies back in the grass and listens. The river, freshly swollen from yesterday's rain, sings to itself. Birds flit between branches. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks a single note. Then he begins. The song is slow and curved like water. It follows no pattern, no refrain, just motion. It trickles and pools, rises and stills. For a long while, he plays with his eyes closed, the flute held loosely between his fingers like it belongs there more than anywhere else. He doesn't notice when Clem arrives, or that Clem sits beside him quietly, his lute unstrapped but untouched. "You sound like the river now," Clem says after the final note. Leofric nods, wiping condensation from the wooden mouthpiece. "It's teaching me." Back in the village square, preparations have begun for a small but meaningful tradition, the first table. It is not a festival, nor a feast. It is simply a table, long and worn, built by hands long gone, set at the center of the square and covered with what little spring has already offered. A handful of early radishes, the first eggs of the season, a jar of wild honey saved from the winter stores, a wheel of hard cheese, a loaf of fresh rye bread. Each item is placed with care, not because it is abundant, but because it is shared. Mara adds a bundle of wild mint she picked near the brook. Gareth brings cured strips of venison. Even Tomric contributes. 2 carefully cleaned trout from the morning's catch laid out on moss-covered stones. Isolde oversees the arrangement, not as a leader, but as a keeper of rhythm. She hums softly as she sets out clay cups, filled not with wine, but with warm cider steeped in thyme. At dusk, the villagers gather. They do not sit all at once. They come and go, some pausing to eat, others to tell stories or simply pass the time with hands warmed around cups. Children chase each other in spirals around the table legs, their laughter rising like birdsong. Clem strums a few chords. Leofric joins, this time standing, his flute lifting the melodies above the rooftops. There is no speech, no ceremony, only a sense of enough. Enough food to nourish, enough music to soften, enough presence to remind them, we are here, together. Tomric speaks little, as always, but when asked by Edwin how long the next planting cycle will take, he offers only one sentence: as long as it takes. No one argues. Later that night, after the last plate has been cleared and the final candle stub has burned low, Mara curls up beside Isolde near the dying hearth. Why do we do it? She asks. Do what? Put food on a table when we barely have enough for ourselves? Isolde doesn't answer right away. She pokes at the coals and adds a small log. The orange light flickers across her face. Because spring isn't just about what grows from the ground, she says. It's about what grows between us. Mara's eyes drift closed and she whispers, I like that better than a story. The log pops. The wind shifts. And somewhere outside, a fox passes quietly between 2 cottages, pausing only once to glance at the table still standing in the center of the square. Its nose lifts, its tail flicks, and it moves on, leaving no tracks but reminding the earth that everything watches. Ashgrove sleeps, not in fear, not in hunger, but in the gentle weight of shared work, shared silence, and the deep, steady roots of a village that knows. To begin again, you do not need fireworks. You only need a table, a hand, a song, and the willingness to say, this is ours, and we will keep it well. The days are longer now. You can feel it in the light, the way it lingers in the air like a guest not ready to leave, warming the stone paths between cottages and casting long, golden shadows that stretch across the fields. In Ashgrove, this light is not wasted. It is caught, held, used. Isolde begins her mornings before the sun even fully rises. She stands in the garden behind the bakery, hands sunk into the earth, turning soil with slow reverence. The ground is dark and rich, full of worms and promise. Mara stands nearby, holding a tin pail and watching with quiet attention. You always dig in the same spot, the girl says. Isolde nods. The roots remember. It's good to return. The garden has become a place of learning. Not formal lessons, no chalkboard or books, but lessons nonetheless. How to test the soil by scent. How to tell which way the wind will blow by watching the leaves. How to walk through a patch of nettles and come out unscathed. Isolde teaches with her hands, her silences, and her patience. And Mara learns not because she is told, but because she listens. Elsewhere, Clem is working on something rare, a new song. He has taken to sitting on the chapel steps each afternoon, notebook open on his knees, the worn lute cradled like an old friend across his lap. Leofric joins him most days, sitting nearby with his flute resting in the grass. I think, Clem says one day, this one should sound like planting. Leofric tilts his head. Like digging? No, Clem says, like faith. They don't speak again for a while, just sit, eyes on the sky, fingers drifting lazily over strings and wood, until something starts to take shape, not melody exactly, but feeling, the shape of a season. Tomric, meanwhile, is building. He's always building something, but now there's purpose to the way he moves, a clarity. This week, it's a new tool shed behind the grain house. Nothing fancy, just 4 sturdy walls and a sloped roof to keep the rain off. But to Tomric, it's more than a shelter. It's a sign of preparation, of steadiness, of next steps. Gareth helps without being asked. He brings nails, spare planks, even a new chisel that he traded for in the village beyond the ridge. They don't talk much as they work, but the quiet between them is easy, like the silence between verses of a song. On the third day of construction, Edwin stops by, curious. "You're putting it up fast," he observes. Tomric shrugs. "Winter taught us time doesn't wait." The shed is finished before the week's end, and inside, Tomric places the tools one by one, not haphazardly, but with order, each object where it belongs, ready. That same evening, the village gathers not for a celebration or ritual, but simply because the air is too good to stay indoors. A soft breeze drifts through the square. Lanterns are lit, not bright, just enough to glow like fireflies strung between branches. Someone brings out bread, someone else cheese. The cider jug makes its way from hand to hand, and laughter rises like steam from the cobbled stones. Leofric plays gently. His melody is simple, almost hesitant, like a question. But Clem answers, his lute sliding into the spaces between notes, giving them structure and strength. Mara twirls near the fire pit, trailing a ribbon of blue cloth behind her like a comet. "Dance with me," she calls. Isolde chuckles, but stays seated, brushing crumbs from her lap. "Just one turn," Mara insists. Isolde finally rises and they spin together, one old, one young, both shining. Even Tomric smiles. Later, when the embers have cooled and the stars have taken their places overhead, the villagers sit in a loose circle around the fire's last heat. "What comes next?" someone asks. Clem leans forward. More planting, more music, more hours with soil under the nails and wind in the lungs, more mornings that begin before the sky is fully blue and nights that stretch longer than stories can hold. Not faster, not louder, just more. That night, Leofric stays awake long after the others have gone. He sits on the stone wall near the chapel, flute across his knees, watching the way moonlight plays against the grain of wood. In the distance, an owl calls. He plays just one note. Clear, soft, true. And for a moment, it feels like the village holds its breath, not in fear, but in awe. The next morning, Mara bursts through the bakery door with arms full of blossoms. Look, the whole grove bloomed. And she is right. Along the edge of the village, near the old elm and the forgotten gate, the wildflowers have returned. Not in patches or single stems, but in waves, white, yellow, violet. A sea of color, low to the earth and glowing in the morning light. Isolde walks among them slowly, fingers trailing just above the petals. "They waited," she murmurs, "and now they remind us." "Remind us of what?" Mara asks. "That we are always more patient than we think." The days no longer whisper, they sing. Ashgrove wakes each morning in sunlight. Not weak, winter light, but full, golden beams that flood through windows and chase away every trace of chill. The roofs are dry now, the chimneys smoke less, and the air smells of damp grass, wild thyme, and promise. Even the bees have returned. Mara is the first to notice. She stands at the edge of Isolde's herb garden, watching as two golden shapes flit between flowers, their hum delicate but certain. "They're back," she says with awe, as if speaking of old friends. Isolde nods without looking up from the basin of water where she's washing new carrots. "They always come back, just like us." The fields surrounding the village are alive. Tomric, Gareth, and Edwin move through them like slow waves. They dig, rake, shape, and seed, each gesture part of a familiar ritual honed over seasons. Tomric carries the weight of planning, Gareth the weight of strength, Edwin the weight of detail. Together they carry the spring. At midday, Clem joins them. Not to work the soil, his hands aren't suited for it, but to bring rhythm. He drums gently on an old seed box, keeping pace with the rise and fall of hoes, the crunch of boots, the soft rustle of grain sacks. Music, he says, helps the roots settle better. "Roots have ears," he adds with a grin. That afternoon, a small but important visitor arrives, a swallow. It darts through the air above the square, fast and certain, its tail forked like a wish. The children chase after it with squeals of delight, and the adults look on with quiet reverence. Leofric watches from the roof of the granary where he's been helping hang nets to keep out the crows. He lowers the final hook and sits back, following the bird's path across the sky. "They've come early this year," Clem says, arriving beside him. Leofric nods. They know something. They always do. That evening, as the sun sets in streaks of rose and copper, the village gathers once more. This time, not around a feast or a fire, but around a cradle. No one had expected the baby to arrive so soon, certainly not in the middle of planting season. But life, like the river, follows its own current. The parents, Alia and Morin, sit proudly on the bench outside their cottage, the tiny bundle cradled in Alia's arms. The baby sleeps, unaware of the attention, her breath soft as the breeze. "Have you named her?" Isolde asks gently. Alia nods. "Leora, it means light." And it fits. There is something radiant about the child, perhaps not in appearance, but in timing. She was born just after the last frost, when the first true warmth kissed the village. Her arrival marks something more than birth. It marks arrival itself. Clem strums a lullaby. Leofric plays a quiet harmony. Mara tiptoes close and places a violet near the baby's swaddling cloth. "She needs color," she whispers. Leora stirs but does not cry. The villagers smile. As twilight deepens, candles are lit, not out of necessity but tradition. Each home glows from within, and the square itself becomes a constellation of flickering flame. The cradle sits at the center, surrounded by baskets of offerings, breads, herbs, wool, carved wooden toys. Not because the parents asked, but because it's what Ashgrove does. When one of them grows, they all grow. Tomric steps forward last. In his large hands, he carries a small block of cedar wood shaped into a gentle arch. He says nothing as he places it beside the cradle. "What is it?" Alia asks, curious. Tomric shrugs. "A bridge," he says, "in case she needs to cross anything." It is perhaps the most beautiful gift of all. As the stars emerge above the rooftops, Clem speaks. Not loudly, not as a speech, but simply a reflection. "We planted roots this week," he says, "and now the sky returns the favor." The villagers do not clap, they do not cheer, they simply nod, each one feeling the truth of it in their own chest. That night, Ashgrove sleeps more deeply than it has in weeks. The river runs louder, the forest breathes, and a new heartbeat joins the rhythm of the village. In the early hours, before even the birds begin their song, Isolde wakes with a thought she cannot shake. She dresses quietly and steps outside, the grass cool under her bare feet. She walks past the bakery, past the chapel, past the stone wall that marks the edge of the old path to the eastern woods. There, beneath the budding branches of a young ash tree, she stands still and listens, and she smiles, because the wind no longer carries the bite of winter. It carries warmth and laughter and lullabies. The days have found their rhythm. Not rushed, not idle, just right. Ashgrove has entered that rare season between doing and waiting. Seeds have been sown, tools cleaned and stored, songs played and echoed. The fields no longer demand, they breathe, and the people for once allow themselves to do the same. Mara spends most mornings outside now, gathering, not because anyone tells her to, but because she likes knowing what's growing where. She brings back handfuls of mint, 3 types of clover, and once, with shining eyes, a single red mushroom. "Not that one," Isolde had said with a gentle hand. "Some things are meant to stay wild." So Mara leaves the mushroom where it was, but she visits it every day. Tomric has returned to the forest edge, not for firewood, not for hunting, just to walk. He doesn't speak about it, but Gareth notices the change. Tomric comes back each time with something small in hand, a stone, a feather, a bit of curled bark. "I'm just looking," Tomric says when asked, but they all know he's listening. Meanwhile, Edwin has started mapping again, not borders or fields this time, but time. He's tracking flowering patterns, noting how early the bees arrived when the first egg hatched, what time the dew lifts from the grass each day. "It's like the earth is speaking in numbers," he explains. Leofric nods. "I prefer songs, but I suppose they're not so different." In the afternoons, Clem has begun visiting the oldest members of the village. Quietly, respectfully. Not with questions, but with presence. He brings his lute and sometimes just plays outside their doors until someone invites him in. He spends an entire afternoon with Elder Nora, who hasn't left her home since the first snow. By sunset, the shutters are open, a plate of honey biscuits has been shared, and Nora is humming along to a melody that sounds like wind through wheat. Clem leaves smiling. She remembers more music than I do, he tells Isolde that evening. She remembers everything, Isolde says. She just needed a reason to speak. One morning, the chapel bell rings twice. Not for warning, not for worship, but for gathering. Isolde is the one who asked for it, though she doesn't explain why until they've all arrived. The square is full, yet quiet. The breeze carries the scent of rosemary and new growth. I think it's time, Isolde says simply, to tend the old garden. A hush falls. For a moment, no one moves. The old garden lies behind the chapel. It hasn't been touched in years, not out of neglect, but out of reverence. It was once a place of memory, planted by the hands of those no longer here. When the last of the elders who tended it passed, no one dared step in. Until now. Mara is the first to speak. I can help, she says. So can Leofric and Gareth and Clem, and one by one the rest follow. That afternoon, they walk to the garden together. The gate creaks open, its hinges stiff from seasons without use. Inside, the space is overgrown but not unkind. Vines have crept across the stones. Lavender has seeded itself wild. The rosemary bush, though untrimmed, is thriving. They move slowly. They do not pull up everything. They do not impose. They listen first. Tomric kneels at the far edge where the markers stand, carved names half worn by time. He brushes away moss with the back of his hand and nods to no one in particular. We're still here, he says. Mara finds a patch of forgotten tulips just beginning to break through the ground. They didn't give up, she says softly. Clem plays as they work, not a loud tune, but one like distant bells, gentle and constant. Leofric hums along, fingers tapping the rhythm on his knee. They prune, they clear space, they trim but do not erase. By sundown, the garden has changed, not back to what it was, but forward to what it might now become. Isolde stands at the center, her eyes shining, not from sadness, but from memory returned. We've made room, she says, room for flowers, room for stories, room for those still here and those only present in the way light lingers on old stone. That night, no formal gathering is called, but people bring candles anyway. They set them on the edges of the chapel wall along the path to the garden, on windowsills and doorsteps. Not bright flames, just soft ones, one for each name remembered, one for each voice that once sang here, one for each hand that planted something long ago. Ashgrove glows, no feast, no speech, only a hush, only presence. Mara curls beside Isolde by the fire, hands still faintly dirt-streaked. Why did we wait so long, she asks. Isolde doesn't answer right away, then because some things grow in silence first. Outside, the wind moves through the branches of the ash tree, scattering blossoms across the cobblestones like snow made of petals. Leofric watches from his window and begins to write. Not music this time, but something else. A letter, perhaps. Or a memory. Or just the feeling of a night like this, where everything is still, and still everything moves. The next morning arrives like a blessing. The light doesn't just fall, it pours. Through windows, across stones, into the creases of worn hands, and the laughter lines of every face that meets the new day. Ashgrove is not loud, but it is alive in the way ancient things breathe. Steady, unafraid, and in full awareness of the moment. Mara wakes with a question on her lips. Can we keep it? Isolde, already pouring water into the kettle, raises an eyebrow. Keep what, little sprout? Mara twirls slowly, gesturing out the open window. This, the feeling, the quiet that feels like music, the garden, the light. Isolde smiles not with amusement, but with understanding. We can't keep it, she says, but we can honor it, and sometimes that's the same thing. Outside, the old garden behind the chapel looks different in the sun, not because it's been transformed, but because it has been touched, tended, remembered. That alone is enough to make things shine. Edwin walks its perimeter, making notes on a small slip of parchment. Not data this time, observations. He sketches the tulips Mara found, labels a cluster of thyme that somehow survived 3 winters, and writes, "Possible moon herb? Uncertain. Worth watching." Tomric sits beneath the ash tree, hands wrapped around a wooden mug. His boots are caked in dry soil from yesterday's work, but he doesn't seem in a hurry to clean them. He watches the breeze shift across the garden like a careful hand brushing the top of a child's head. He says nothing, but his silence is full. Leofric and Clem arrive a little before midday, instruments slung across their backs like old traveling companions. They sit near the gate, tuning strings and reed in gentle harmony. Clem has a new melody, something he's been working on since the cradle appeared in the square. It has 3 parts, he explains. One for what was, one for what is, and one for what might be. Like seasons, Leofric says, like us. They don't perform, they just play, slowly, with room for air between notes. It floats out over the garden and into the village, where it lands not with applause, but with a quiet exhale from whoever hears it. That afternoon, Gareth comes running. Not in panic, but excitement. "There's something in the grove," he says, breathless, near the western fence. They all follow, some walking, some trotting, Mara skipping as always. What they find is not startling. It is startlingly beautiful. A ring of mushrooms, perfectly formed, not the kind that rots or bites, but soft, pale ones, almost glowing in the dappled light beneath the canopy. Around them, wild primroses bloom in a tangled circle. "Nature's handwriting," Isolde murmurs. No one steps inside the ring, not out of fear, out of respect. Mara stares, wide-eyed. "Should we do something?" Leofric nods. "We just did." They leave it untouched. Later, a woven garland of grasses appears near the mushrooms. No one says who made it, but everyone knows someone did. That night, the village feels full. Not crowded, not noisy, just whole. Dinner is quiet, shared, but not formal. People pass bowls from one window to the next, laugh softly under lanterns, and take time pouring tea. Clem tries a new song, and it falters halfway through, but no one minds. "It's still growing," he says, "like the rest of us." Gareth replies. Tomric, who rarely speaks during meals, suddenly lifts his head. "There's something I've been thinking," he begins. "Everyone stills, not in tension, but in readiness. This spring, we did more than plant. We returned to the soil, to each other. We remembered that we're not just surviving here, we're continuing. It isn't a speech, it's just truth." And in the quiet that follows, Isolde raises her cup. "To roots." They all echo her. "To roots." Then Leofric adds, "To wings." They echo again, "To wings." And Clem, ever the poet, lifts his voice last, "To all the space in between." And no one echoes him. Because some things are best left as echoes on their own. The stars return that night like they never left. Piercing, bright, ancient. The kind of night sky that makes you feel very small, but also very held. Mara leans against the windowsill, her rabbit doll in one hand, and watches the stars like she's looking for someone she once knew. "Do you think they can see us?" she asks. "Who?" Isolde replies, tucking a blanket around her shoulders. "The people who came before." Isolde nods. "I think they've always been watching, waiting, and tonight, I think, they're smiling." They don't speak again. They just sit by the window until sleep wins, and outside, the ring of mushrooms glows faintly under the stars, as if nodding, too. The next morning arrives like a blessing. The light doesn't just fall, it pours. Through windows, across stones, into the creases of worn hands and the laughter lines of every face that meets the new day. Ashgrove is not loud, but it is alive in the way ancient things breathe, steady, unafraid, and in full awareness of the moment. Mara wakes with a question on her lips. "Can we keep it?" Isolde, already pouring water into the kettle, raises an eyebrow. "Keep what, little sprout?" Mara twirls slowly, gesturing out the open window. "This, the feeling, the quiet that feels like music, the garden, the light." Isolde smiles, not with amusement, but with understanding. "We can't keep it," she says, "but we can honor it, and sometimes that's the same thing." Outside, the old garden behind the chapel looks different in the sun, not because it's been transformed, but because it has been touched, tended, remembered. That alone is enough to make things shine. Edwin walks its perimeter, making notes on a small slip of parchment. Not data this time, observations. He sketches the tulips Mara found, labels a cluster of thyme that somehow survived 3 winters, and writes, "Possible moon herb? Uncertain. Worth watching." Tomric sits beneath the ash tree, hands wrapped around a wooden mug. His boots are caked in dry soil from yesterday's work, but he doesn't seem in a hurry to clean them. He watches the breeze shift across the garden like a careful hand brushing the top of a child's head. He says nothing, but his silence is full. Leofric and Clem arrive a little before midday, instruments slung across their backs like old traveling companions. They sit near the gate, tuning strings and read in gentle harmony. Clem has a new melody, something he's been working on since the cradle appeared in the square. "It has 3 parts," he explains. "One for what was, one for what is, and one for what might be." Like seasons, Leofric says, like us. They don't perform, they just play, slowly, with room for air between notes. It floats out over the garden and into the village, where it lands not with applause, but with a quiet exhale from whoever hears it. That afternoon, Gareth comes running, not in panic, but excitement. "There's something in the grove," he says, breathless, "near the western fence." They all follow, some walking, some trotting, Mara skipping as always. What they find is not startling, it is startlingly beautiful. A ring of mushrooms, perfectly formed. Not the kind that rots or bites, but soft, pale ones, almost glowing in the dappled light beneath the canopy. Around them, wild primroses bloom in a tangled circle. "Nature's handwriting," Isolde murmurs. No one steps inside the ring, not out of fear, out of respect. Mara stares, wide-eyed. "Should we do something?" Leofric nods. "We just did." They leave it untouched. Later, a woven garland of grasses appears near the mushrooms. No one says who made it, but everyone knows someone did. That night, the village feels full. Not crowded, not noisy, just whole. Dinner is quiet, shared but not formal. People pass bowls from one window to the next, laugh softly under lanterns, and take time pouring tea. Clem tries a new song, and it falters halfway through, but no one minds. "It's still growing," he says, "like the rest of us." Gareth replies. Tomric, who rarely speaks during meals, suddenly lifts his head. "There's something I've been thinking," he begins. Everyone stills, not in tension, but in readiness. "This spring, we did more than plant. We returned. To the soil, to each other. We remembered that we're not just surviving here. We're continuing. It isn't a speech, it's just truth." And in the quiet that follows, Isolde raises her cup. "To roots." They all echo her. "To roots." Then Leofric adds, "To wings." They echo again, "To wings." And Clem, ever the poet, lifts his voice last, "To all the space in between." And no one echoes him, because some things are best left as echoes on their own. The stars return that night like they never left, piercing, bright, ancient. The kind of night sky that makes you feel very small but also very held. Mara leans against the windowsill, her rabbit doll in one hand, and watches the stars like she's looking for someone she once knew. "Do you think they can see us?" she asks. "Who?" Isolde replies, tucking a blanket around her shoulders. "The people who came before," Isolde nods. "I think they've always been watching, waiting. And tonight, I think, they're smiling. They don't speak again, they just sit by the window until sleep wins. And outside, the ring of mushrooms glows faintly under the stars, as if nodding too. Morning comes, not with fanfare, but with golden quiet. The village of Ashgrove wakes to the soft rustling of wind through young leaves, the creak of shutters opening, the low whistle of someone boiling water over an outdoor fire. There is no announcement, no festival, but everyone feels it. Something has arrived, not a visitor, not a storm, just a moment, a season completing its circle. Mara is the first to sense it in her bones. She steps out barefoot, the grass still damp from dawn, her ribbon fluttering behind her like a streamer from a maypole. She walks not toward the bakery or the chapel, but to the heart of the old garden. And there, beneath the ash tree, she sits, She doesn't need to be told what to do. She simply waits. One by one, the others come. Tomric, boots in hand, feet bare like hers. Gareth with a half-finished carving in his belt loop. Edwin clutching his tiny notebook, even though he knows he won't write today. Clem and Leofric, shoulder to shoulder, each carrying silence more comfortably than most men carry tools. Even Isolde comes, without her apron for once. She wears a linen shawl the color of sage and walks slowly, but with purpose. They all find a place near the tree. No one says why. No one needs to. The air itself holds the meaning. This was never about planting or harvesting or even surviving. This was about remembering that to live well is to be woven into something, into soil, into song, into each other. Gareth pulls out his carving, now finished, a bird. Simple, smooth, its wings tucked in as if it too is listening. He sets it at the base of the ash tree without a word. Clem hums a single note. It's not music yet, but it could become music, like a seed becoming fruit. Leofric joins him, playing a low harmony that drifts like smoke between them all. Tomric places his hands flat on the ground. The warmth of the sun has already touched the roots. The soil is not cold, it's alive. And as he listens, eyes closed, he feels something stir, not beneath him, but within. Mara breaks the silence, not with a question, but with a truth. We didn't build this. They turn to her. This feeling, this place, it was already here. We just uncovered it. Isolde nods. That's how most good things begin. They remain there, the wind threading through hair and leaves, the smell of rosemary and earth rising around them. It's not dramatic. It's not loud, but it is whole. By midday they scatter, gently, as petals do. Mara helps Isolde carry water back to the bakery. Tomric returns to the grove to finish reinforcing the fence. Clem goes to the square and begins a new song without knowing where it will end. And the cradle? Still there. Not in the middle of the square anymore, but on the porch of Aelia and Morin's home. Leora sleeps through the rustle of the world, wrapped in a shawl hand-woven by Elder Nora, who now walks again with a cane carved by Gareth himself. It is as if the village, having breathed in deeply all spring, now exhales with calm. That evening, no one plans anything, but doors stay open. Tables stretch just a bit longer. Someone places a candle on the chapel step. Another lights a lantern near the old garden. Soon, there are points of light scattered everywhere. Not like fire, but like stars fallen from the sky to remind them, you are seen. Leofric plays his flute again, not for show, but to say, this is the sound of here. Clem sings a verse that rhymes not because it must, but because the day asked for a closing line. Tomric raises his mug. Nothing strong, just warm cider. To those who came before. Isolde touches her glass to his. To those who are still coming. Mara, standing on her tiptoes, lifts her cup of tea high. To those who remember. The three toasts meet in the middle like river forks joining into one. And the night carries it all upward. Not for applause, not for legacy, but simply because the wind was listening. That night, Mara writes in a notebook she hasn't shown anyone before. Just a few words. No grand thoughts. The garden grows, the stars still shine, and I think I might always belong here. She closes the book, sets it beneath her pillow, and drifts to sleep with the ash tree still blooming in her mind. Ashgrove sleeps too, but not like it once did. Now, it dreams of rain on warm roofs, of laughter between meals, of lullabies shared without music, and of roots deep enough to hold everything, even the future. And so, dear friends, our time in Ashgrove, for now, comes to a close. But before we part ways tonight, I'd love to hear from you. What moment touched your heart the most? Which character stayed with you after the story faded? Or maybe there's a feeling you can't quite name, but still lingers, like music in an empty room. Share it with us in the comments. Every thought you write adds another thread to this quiet tapestry we're weaving together. If this story brought you comfort, stillness, or a sense of belonging, even just a little, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss the next journey we take. and it helps our small storytelling village grow. Thank you for spending your night here, for letting Ash Grove into your thoughts and perhaps your dreams. Until our next tale, may your days be gentle, your nights restful, and your spirit rooted like the old ash tree itself. Take care, sleep well, and I'll see you in the next story.